Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Deku Was Frozen in Time? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was a lovely day, a normal one. No one would expect anything to go wrong. Everything was perfect, a little too perfect. By the end of the day, everyone's life changed. Nedzu was in his office drinking peppermint tea and looking through a thick packet of paper. There were names and phone numbers on most of the pages. A lot of them were crossed out, but others had stars next to them. He also had a few library cards scattered across his desk. He grinned while looking through the packet and took out a small green notebook. After writing for a few minutes, he took another sip of his tea. Izuku decided to sit on the bus between Uraraka and Shinso. He sat down and smiled at them. As they got closer to their destination, they decided to discuss quirks. My hardening's super strong and can destroy bad guys in a fight, but it doesn't look all that impressive, Kirishima lamented. Oh no way. I think it's really impressive and useful. You're definitely pro-material with a quirk like that. You really think so? Kirishima asked hopefully. Of course, your quirk is very versatile and can be used for both offense and defense purposes, Izuku assured him. Kirishima smiled brightly at him in response. My naval lasers got the perfect combination of panache and strength, Aoyama bragged. That's true, but the drawback of your quirk really hinders your ability to show it off, Izuku reminded him gently. Well, if any of our classmates have pro quirks, it's Todoroki and Bakugo, Kirishima said. Sure, but Bakugo's always angry, so he'll never be that popular, Azui stated. What did you say? I'll kick your ass? Bakugo growled. See? Azui said calmly. You know, we basically just met you. So it's kinda telling that we all know your personality is flaming garbage steeped with crap, Kaminari grinned. You're gonna regret the day you applied to this school, you loser. Bakugo shouted. We're here. Stop messing around, Aizawa announced. Yes, sir. Everyone agreed at once before slowly leaving the bus. Izuku left last and went to stand near Aizawa. They were standing a few feet away from the group. While Aizawa dialed a number, his other students were being introduced to USJ by 13. What do you mean you haven't seen him? Shoyuda hissed angrily through the phone. Hizashi understood why Shoyuda was stressed, but he knew that Shoyuda and 13 could handle the children by themselves. Yagi is running a little late. Did you not read the articles? Hizashi inquired. Yes, I did. That absolute idiot. What was he thinking? If he keeps using up his time like that dash. I know. I'll make sure he gets to you as soon as possible, Hizashi assured him. For now, go on ahead or else you all will start late, Hizashi reminded him. Shoyuda groaned. I swear when I see him, I am going to strangle him. Careful, that's not very heroic, Shoyuda. Plus, wouldn't that be too much press coverage? Hizashi teased. Shoyuda let out a long sigh. Come on, that's funny. Hizashi said. Bye, Hizashi. Oh, Problem Child said hi and is very excited about the trip, Shoyuda said with a hint of a smile. Tell him what I said and have fun. Love you both. Hizashi said. Yeah, love you too, Shoyuda whispered so his students wouldn't hear. Hizashi laughed to himself a little. Hearing his husband rant about the number one pro hero the whole morning. It was a little amusing when he thought about it, considering how much time they all spent together over the past few months. Hizashi poured himself coffee and chatted with his friends in the teacher's lounge. Yagi burst through the door. He seemed exhausted and looked like he was going to pass out. Yamada, I am so sorry for being late. I'll be heading over there soon. I'll just grab some tea and drink it on the way dash, Yagi rambled before Hizashi cut him off. Absolutely not. Look at you. You need to rest, Hizashi said. What? No, I'm already late and I need to get there so Aizawa dash. You are staying here for at least 30 minutes to rest, Hizashi said as he began to drag the pro hero towards the sofa. Yamada I don't think dash. I'd rather you rest before going on the road like this. Please, just stay for 30 minutes. It's not like I'm asking you to stay the whole day. You just need rest. What kind of tea would you like? Hisashi asked firmly. You're persistent, Yagi commented. Well, you need to take care of yourself. Now, what tea would you like? Hisashi repeated himself sternly. Yagi caved in and sat down as he told him his favorite tea. Of course, you'd pick Earl Grey, Hisashi laughed. What do you mean? Yagi asked while slowly letting himself relax on the sofa. It's very like you, Hisashi grinned knowingly. Yagi stared at him in confusion while Hisashi laughed. How are your cats doing? I know young Midoriya enjoys spending time with them. They're all as healthy as ever. Though I'm jealous that Ace likes Izuku so much more than me, Hisashi sighed dramatically. Yagi laughed for a moment before accepting the tea from Hisashi with a smile. Thank you. It smells delicious. As Yagi began to drink his tea, Nezu came by. Hello, Nezu, what brings you here? Hisashi asked. I wanted to check on Yagi, considering you were quite busy this morning, he said while turning to stare at Yagi. I get that it's our job to help people, but you can't do it all, Yagi, Hisashi scolded. Yagi laughed nervously. Bad habit? Yagi laughed off. Very funny. But you need to be more responsible, Yagi. Hisashi continued. Yeah, I know. I still have Aizawa to deal with later, Yagi said nervously. Hisashi laughed. He is going to rip you apart? Yagi groaned and Nezu let out a small, devious giggle. Despite the rough morning, everything seemed to be peaceful. How long do you intend to rest? Nezu asked. I have to leave in 15 minutes, Yagi said, realizing how much time passed. Yagi, Hisashi warned. I agreed to stay for 30 minutes, he protested. Hisashi really couldn't argue with that. Fair point, Hisashi acknowledged. How is Midoriya's progress going? Nezu asked abruptly. He is making a lot of progress. He has been smiling more, becoming a little more social, and he now has friends. Hisashi exclaimed excitedly. His memory hasn't had any improvement, his training is going better than expected, and his therapy sessions haven't changed much, Yagi added. Interesting, Nezu said with a gleam in his eyes. Hisashi didn't like Nezu's tone or the look in his eyes. Why wanted to check up on our little listener? Hisashi asked. Well, I have been observing him. I have a small theory about him that could help us get more answers, Nezu answered. What are those theories exactly? Hisashi said, now feeling nervous and terrified on Izuku's behalf. Before they could go any farther, the door slammed open. Hisashi was struck with fear when he saw Ida Tenya panting against the door, looking terrified. Then what he said made time stand still. We are being attacked at USJ. There are villains at USJ and we need help. Ida shouted, terrified he might have been too late. Hisashi's thoughts went straight to his husband and Izuku. Izuku would be defenseless and his husband, at this very moment, was fighting to keep his kids safe. God, please don't let it be too late. These thoughts repeated themselves over and over in Hisashi's head. Today had been a lovely day, but it was also the day Hisashi received the most terrifying news. The bus ride was loud, and Aizawa hated it. The only comforts he had were being in his sleeping bag and seeing Izuku so happy. He hated to admit how close he got with his problem child, but he cared about him. Seeing him happy just made Aizawa happy. He wanted to protect Izuku and make sure he would never be harmed again. This was a feeling he felt deep down and was never going to admit out loud. He groaned as he overheard his students brag about their quirks. It quickly escalated to Bakugo once again, losing his temper. The bus stopped, and they entered the USJ. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. Izuku made sure to stay close to Aizawa. 13 greeted Aizawa as the students talked with one another. Then 13 asked about All Might's absence. Aizawa waited impatiently for All Might. You'd think the #1 pro hero would be more responsible, but no, he had to fight some villains before arriving. He understood that it was their job as heroes, however, All Might liked to do things himself. Not being willing to trust others to do their job was a little annoying. Izuku was worried since All Might hadn't shown up and Aizawa was busy ranting to his husband. As 13 introduced the USJ to the students, Aizawa walked a few feet away and dialed Hisashi's number. After ending his call with his husband, Aizawa quietly repeated Hisashi's words to Izuku. Izuku smiled softly in response. After a few moments, Izuku hesitantly voiced his question. Aizawa? Yes, problem child? Aizawa asked. Will I need to stay behind since All Might isn't here? Izuku questioned. He looked upset at the idea of being left behind, but they did have an agreement. Aizawa was about to reply when he remembered what his husband said. We can't keep him locked up here forever. After all, the whole point of being frozen was to give him a better life, right? Aizawa knew he was right. Sheltering him wouldn't help at all, and Aizawa was sure that Hisashi would send Yagi as soon as possible. You can still come, but you must follow every order I give. Got it? Izuku nodded excitedly. Good. Aizawa was cut off as Izuku hugged him. Aizawa stood there a little stiffly before patting him on the head. Sorry, Izuku said, pulling away. Izuku then ran off to reunite with his friends. Aizawa waited a few moments more before moving to stand next to 13. That's 13, right? Izuku asked. Yes, it is. She is a rescue hero. That's the kind of hero I want to be, Uraraka explained. I think it fits you well since your quirk could be really useful. You could use it to move rubble that can't be physically picked up or to save people from falling. Izuku started rambling. Alright, settle down, class. This is 13. She is a rescue hero, as some of you might have heard, Aizawa began. The class turned to listen as Aizawa began talking. Even in disasters, you need to know how to handle things. Kirishima cut off Aizawa. Wow, those villains look real. I didn't know villains were a part of the course. Kirishima said, pointing. Aizawa quickly turned to see what Kirishima was talking about. There was a large purple mist and villains were pouring out of the mist. There were two that stuck out, a blue-haired man with hands wrapped around his arms and face. Then there was a birdman creature standing next to him with its brain exposed. I thought we were just doing rescues? Kirishima questioned nervously. Aizawa put on his goggles and turned to face his students. This is real. Those are real villains. Aizawa used his scarf to fight a nearby villain. 13. Protect the students. 13. That controls Midoriya's quirk suppressants. I trust you will make the right decision. He threw the remote to her. She easily caught it. Aizawa, you can't fight them all on your own. Izuku argued as he ran over towards him. Problem child, you must stay here. Do you understand? Aizawa asked calmly. Though on the inside he was slightly anxious. He'd taught many classes, and nothing like this had ever happened before. Why would so many villains choose now to attack? Was it because of All Might, or Izuku? They had to be here for All Might. All for One is gone. Aizawa reasoned internally. Izuku hesitated. Izuku, don't argue with me. Listen to orders, got it? Aizawa cut him off. He was startled but nodded in agreement. Then Aizawa jumped into the battle. We have come here to kill All Might. The blue-haired man shouted. Aizawa was quickly surrounded. He activated his quirk and observed their confused reactions. Aizawa immediately started taking down villains. He just needed to take down as many as he could. Shit, what the hell happened to the alarm? It had to have been someone's quirk, Aizawa thought. He was able to handle the villains who surrounded him. Somehow, he managed to defeat those villains. He had to. 13's quirk wasn't suited for combat, and she was a rescue hero. Aizawa logically knew he couldn't do this for too long. He could manage for a while, but he would either end up tired or overwhelmed. Either way, he was going to get screwed no matter what. What if they killed his students, or worse, captured them? Then they could ask for a trade, the kids for All Might. But they might only keep a kid or two alive and murder the rest. There's no guarantee that they'll keep any of them alive, but now is not the time to ponder their next move. Aizawa reminded himself. Eraserhead, I'd like to consider myself a huge fan of yours, the blue-haired man said. Aizawa focused his attention on him. Shit, he's too close, Aizawa thought as he cursed himself. How rude of me. I am Shigaraki Tamura. He introduced himself. Aizawa had already taken care of more than enough villains. He faced them all at once. He knew, as a hero, that it was his job to fight these battles, but he also needed to be smart. He knew he couldn't fight them all, not by himself. He just needed to stall a little longer. Your quirk, it's quite interesting. How does it work? Shigaraki asked nonchalantly. Aizawa glanced at the giant muscular bird thing just standing there. What is that? Why is it, or are they just standing there? I figured it out. Your hair, it stands whenever you use your quirk. I get it now. Shigaraki deduced. He may be cocky, but he is smart, Aizawa thought. Well, this is getting boring. I suppose I'll get rid of you myself, Shigaraki declared. He reached out toward him, and Aizawa jumped back. They kept this dance going for a while. However, Aizawa slipped up, and he felt it happen. God, was it painful? It was like his elbow was being set on fire in slow motion. Aizawa instinctively grabbed his elbow. I'm getting bored. Nomu, kill him, Shigaraki ordered in a calm tone. The giant bird thing moved as if given permission to do something. Damn it. Hizashi is going to kill me for this later, Aizawa thought. It happened so fast. In the blink of an eye, but the pain felt like it was lasting for years. He felt his arms snap like a twig, then his head was bashed over and over again, and he could feel his body betraying him at times. He was fighting to just stay conscious while his body was trying to shut down from all the pain. His students need him. He couldn't pass out, not yet. Aizawa realized that he wasn't being bashed into the floor anymore. He opened his eyes to see Shigaraki about to touch one of his students. He didn't even hesitate to use his quirk. Shigaraki could have used his quirk on his student and then Izuku if he didn't activate his quirk. Twin looks of pure terror were written on their faces. You're really cool, Eraserhead, Shigaraki said. Aizawa refused to remove his gaze from Shigaraki. I'm here. Sorry for being late. Hearing All Might's voice was enough for Aizawa to know that they were going to be okay. Aizawa felt someone grab him as he felt a weird feeling take over his body. Young Midoriya, you need to get out of here, All Might warned. No. I can heal him. Aizawa, please be okay. I'm sorry, this is all my fault. I thought, Izuku rambled. Kid, please blaming yourself for things aren't control, Aizawa thought fuzzily. Shoyuta. Izuku. Hey, we are here. Aizawa could hear his husband. He sounded like he was going to cry soon. You're getting help, just hold on. Everyone is safe, the kids are safe, you did an amazing job. Just focus on staying awake. Hizashi said, holding his hands. Aizawa could see that there was a conversation going on, but he couldn't hear anything anymore. If my students and Izuku all alive, then fine. He couldn't make out what he was feeling. He wanted to know what was happening, but his body was not listening to him. He felt it happening as his vision started to darken. He was consumed in the darkness, hoping the fight was finally over. I'm sorry I couldn't long enough. Aizawa apologized to Hizashi, knowing he'd worry once he saw his eyes roll back into his head. Izuku was having a good day. It was a great day, actually. He thought his great day was going to be cut short when Yagi didn't show up. He worried that he was going to be left behind, but was thrilled when Aizawa allowed him to stay. Everything was going perfectly. He was busy mindlessly chatting with his friends, getting to learn more about hero work. It was all honestly really fun. Izuku was having a lot of fun. It really was a good day. Aizawa was in the middle of a lecture when they appeared. Wow, those villains look real. I didn't know villains were a part of the course, Kirishima said while pointing. Everyone turned to see villains pouring out of a purple mist. There were two that stuck out, a blue-haired man with hands wrapped around his arms and face. Then there was a birdman creature standing next to him with its brain exposed. I thought we were just doing rescues? Kirishima questioned nervously. This is real. Those are real villains, Aizawa said as he put on his goggles. Izuku froze as he began processing everything. The shock quickly left the students, panic taking its place. No one knew what to do, and a few students turned to look at Izuku with concern. Izuku focused on Aizawa. He was preparing to fight. Will he really be able to handle all the villains? Izuku thought anxiously. 13, protect the students. 13 here. That controls Midoriya's quirk suppressants. I trust you will make the right decision. Aizawa threw the remote to 13. She caught it easily and Izuku felt terror settle over him. Aizawa. You can't fight them all on your own. Izuku argued as he ran over towards him. Problem child, you must stay here. Do you understand? Aizawa asked calmly. Izuku hesitated. He had agreed to listen to him, but he was worried. Izuku, don't argue with me. Listen to orders, got it? Aizawa cut him off. He was startled, but nodded in agreement. Izuku watched as Aizawa jumped into the fight. Izuku instinctively moved to follow him, but Uraraka gently grabbed his arm. Deku, it's not safe. You're not a hero or hero in training and you can't be reckless. She reasoned with him. Before Izuku could reply, the blue-haired man spoke. We have come here to kill All Might. He shouted. To kill Yagi? How would they even do that? Izuku thought. Like hell, they can do that. Kaken, Bakugo shouted. Kids, stay close to me. Do not engage unless needed. The alarms should be set off soon. 13 announced. Izuku, did you hear 13? We need to move closer to her. Izuku stayed silent and stared at one spot. Uraraka followed his gaze and frowned. While that villain looked particularly vicious, they weren't doing anything yet. She could only think of 2 reasons why he would be staring at them, and neither was good. She shook him and repeated her earlier words to him. When he still refused to budge, she tapped him and activated her quirk. Uraraka dragged Izuku away while Izuku's eyes remained glued on one person. Thing? He really didn't know what it was. He knew it wasn't human. The bird-like creature was familiar. Izuku hated how familiar that thing felt. He kept staring at the thing while guilt turned in his stomach for some reason. Midoriya, you must stay by my side, no matter what. Do you understand? 13 asked while Uraraka released her quirk. Why, yes, I understand, he said. I think someone's quirk is blocking the alarms. It would explain why the alarms haven't gone off yet, Hitoshi suggested. All right, we need to exit the building and alert the school as soon as possible, 13 instructed. The class nodded and started sprinting towards the exit. Though Izuku was trailing behind them a bit. Mina noticed and slowed down. Deku, what's wrong? We need to hurry. Izuku opened his mouth to apologize and assure her that he was fine when he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. I am sorry, but I can't let any of you leave, the purple mist said as he blocked the path. The purple mist began to surround them. 13 quickly deactivated Izuku's quirk suppressants, which Izuku didn't have enough time to process. Everything went dark and he couldn't breathe. He reached out for Mina but couldn't find her anywhere. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but just as suddenly everything went dark, and he was falling into a lake. I can't swim, was the only thought that went through Izuku's head. The water was cold, and he didn't like that. His eyes also began to sting. At first, he was floating a little, and he was in control for a brief moment. Then he was losing control. He was sinking and fear started to kick in. He tried to swim up, but he really didn't know how to swim. He was going to drown here. As he continued to flail randomly, his lungs began to burn. Then he felt a prodding sensation before something wrapped around his waist. He flew out of the lake and onto a boat. He gasped for air as he processed everything. Then he looked around to make sure he wasn't about to be attacked. Sorry, Midoriya. Tsuyu apologized. Thank you, Tsuyu. Izuku said gratefully. Call me Tsu. We are friends. Tsu insisted. Right? Sorry. Izuku replied nervously. Hey guys. A little help. Shinso called. Tsu helped Shinso out of the water with her tongue. You guys alright? Shinso asked a bit breathlessly. Yeah, thanks to Tsuyu dash. Tsu. Call me Tsu. Alright, sorry. Izuku stuttered. Never mind that. Tsu, are there any more students in this area? Shinso asked. Nope. I searched the rest of the area. It only seems to be you and Midoriya, but there are some villains around. Tsu informed them. Well, that's great, Shinso said sarcastically. So they separated us? Well, they did a poor job, Izuku muttered. What do you mean? Shinso questioned. I'm assuming they separated us to make it easier to pick us off since they put villains with us. So why bring Tsu to a lake? They should have put her in a warmer or colder environment. Choosing to send her into a lake would be a poor choice, Izuku pointed out. You are right about that, Shinso agreed. So that means they really don't know anything about our quirks? Tsu acknowledged. Yeah. But just because they are unaware doesn't mean they are going to be reckless, either. Notice how they haven't approached the boat yet. They aren't going to underestimate us, Shinso noted. We still need to come up with a plan. Let's talk about our quirks so we can come up with a plan, Tsu suggested. Should I even use my quirk? Izuku wondered aloud. They looked at him with slightly confused expressions. You guys will get a pass for using your quirks to defend yourself. I'm not allowed to use my quirk without Aizawa's supervision, Izuku explained. I think Aizawa will make an exception. How much control do you have of your quirk? Shinso asked. I have some, Izuku admitted. Do you think it will be enough to help us? Shinso questioned. Izuku was terrified of using all for one. He knew if he took their quirks, he would expose himself. However, he also knew that they could die if he didn't do anything. Yagi and Aizawa will hopefully understand, Izuku thought. Why yeah, I have enough control, Izuku finally answered. Good, now let's come up with something, Shinso said. I'll go first. Tsu volunteered. They both turned their attention toward her. Well, my quirk is frog. Which is really self-explanatory. I can do anything a frog can do. I can jump really far, I am a good swimmer, I can stretch my tongue. And sometimes I can release poison too. Tsu enthusiastically explained. Shinso hummed to himself. Well, I'm not sure how useful my quirk will be, but my quirk is brainwashing. Basically, I ask a question, and then I can control the person that responds to me. The best I can do is make one of them attack the other. However, I can only control one person at a time, Shinso explained. What about you, Midoriya? What's your quirk? Tsu asked. It kind of works like a copy quirk. Basically, I copied many quirks when I was younger and now I can still access them. It's kinda like saving them and using them later. I can still copy others' quirks, but it affects the person I copy now. It makes the person immobile and it only wears off when I stop copying the quirk. I can only stop copying the quirk when I touch the same person again, Izuku explained. Wow, that's a pretty powerful quirk, Deku, Tsu said. Yeah, it is. Thought about being a hero? Shinso asked genuinely. Izuku hated questions like this as it was still kinda weird to him. And nope, I don't think I need any more excitement in my life, Izuku said. Wait, why did your quirk change? Tsu asked curiously. Oh, I always needed to touch someone when I copied their quirk. However, when I was younger, I only needed to do it once. Now it doesn't seem I am able to do that anymore, Izuku explained, while rubbing his arm. I've heard of that happening, Shinso said. Izuku was relieved that this story actually made sense. Let's not focus on that right now. Is there a quirk that you use that will help us? Tsu asked. Izuku carefully considered his quirk while staring at the nearby villains. He tried to think of a plan when he felt a strange sensation. He felt like he was drowning again, but he could breathe and he was on land. Don't, Izuku began, but he stopped himself when he came to a sudden realization. I can control water, he announced excitedly. Izuku couldn't remember taking a water quirk, but he knew he had one. Wait, really? Shinso asked. Why, I do. I have a plan. If you are willing to hear me out, Izuku said. We're all ears, Tsu replied. Shinso, use your brainwashing to distract the villains while I create a whirlpool so the villains will get sucked into it. Tsu can get us out of here and hopefully, the whirlpool will tire out the villains. Izuku explained. That seems like a solid plan to me, Shinso said. I agree, Tsu said. Alright, buy me some time then, Izuku said as he took a deep breath and focused. He thought about the body of the water they were in and tried to imagine moving the water. Shinso nodded and turned to face the villains. About time, one of the villains said. Geez, you'd think these kids would be brave enough to face us, another villain sneered. Geez, you'd think villains would have the guts to fight real heroes instead of a bunch of teenagers, Shinso retorted. Who the hell do you think you're talking to, kid? Come on, Izuku, focus, move the water. Izuku instinctively moved his arms. A bunch of cowards. Cowards, huh? Why don't you fight us yourself, smartass? The water started moving weakly in a circular motion. Why would I? You got this, Deku. Tsu whispered, encouraged to see it was working. Come on, you cocky bastard. Make the water go faster, Izuku. I'm not a coward. I mean, come on. You guys are so scared of heroes that you'd rather fight inexperienced teenagers. What does that say about you? It was moving faster. Keep going. Listen here, you little dash, the villain abruptly stopped talking. How much longer, Midoriya? Shinso whispered. A little longer, Izuku responded quietly. He was completely unaware of how difficult it would be. Trying his best to keep his quirk under control while being stressed out turned out to be a lot harder than he thought. Got it, none of them noticed. We need to work faster, Shinso whispered. Izuku nodded slightly. Now back to this. Knock out that shark-looking one, Shinso commanded. The hypnotized villain followed Shinso's orders and attacked. The other villains were very confused when their teammate moved quickly and knocked out their other teammate. What was that for, man? Another villain asked while backing up. Shinso released his hold on him then. Well? The man questioned again nervously. Wow, not only are you all cowards, but you're also stupid. Obviously, he's a low-ranking hero who's infiltrated your ranks to arrest you and make a name for himself. Why else would he knock out the strongest man? Hey, he wasn't the strongest. Shinso held back his laughter as yet another villain fell under his control. Attack all of them, Shinso demanded. Izuku shivered while using his quirk. It made him feel soaked to the bone. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply to calm himself down a bit. He didn't notice the condensation he breathed out. Tsu noticed and moved closer to ask him if he was okay when he opened his eyes. His eyes shone and he had a bright smile. Izuku had calmed down enough to focus on his quirk, and as he calmed down, the feeling grew warmer. He now felt like he was taking a swim in warm water. He gained more control and made the whirlpool bigger and stronger. Luckily, none of the villains noticed yet. Tsu was getting ready, now that their escape was going to work. The villains were having an all-out brawl with one another. Luckily, Shinso didn't need to antagonize them anymore. Izuku allowed the whirlpool to take over and basically consume all the villains. Tsu wrapped her tongue around Izuku's waist. Izuku grabbed Shinso's hand tightly, and she jumped off the boat. Shinso was able to swim on his own while Tsu helped Izuku. They swam to the edge of the lake and spotted a fight. Izuku felt his blood run cold. His eyes were glued to the scene. He watched helplessly. He wanted to run in and help but couldn't. He knew Aizawa would kill him if he tried to help. But how could he just stand there and watch? Izuku gasped as he saw Aizawa. His elbow had cracks, bruising, and exposed flesh. After one of the villains finished talking to him, Aizawa turned to see the thing staring down at him. It grabbed him and crushed his face. His gold goggles were sent flying. He lay on the ground surrounded by splatters of blood. The creature had its hand against his back. Izuku. Then the creature shrieked and snapped his elbow. It pulled his elbow back until it snapped and then fell limp, all without a trace of remorse. First right then left. He even tried to use his quirk right before his left elbow was smashed. Izuku hated just watching when he knew he could stop it. He did it before and he could do it again. Izuku shook in horror as it pulled him up by the head while Aizawa trembled. Izuku barely processed, "Let's wreck his pride," before a hand was suddenly reaching towards her. She froze and all Izuku could do was stare. Fingers touched her as Aizawa glared, while blood dripped down his face and his eyes burned red. Then Aizawa's face was slammed into the ground. "No, no, no, please no. I had gotten rid of them. I swear I did. But there is one. Right there." How? Did he figure it out? And no, this can't be possible. I need to get rid of it. It's going to kill Aizawa. We are getting closer to perfecting it, Izuku. No, this is wrong. The Nomu bashed Aizawa's head on the floor. With your help it will be perfect. I don't want any part of it. The Nomu proceeds to break Aizawa's arm. We are going to do great things with our discovery. I want nothing to do with this. They broke Aizawa's other arm. Let's try again, Izuku. This time the Nomu will survive longer. To the Nomu. I know, that's impossible. My father dead. He dead. Yagi killed. Gone. Died. Can't hurt again. Aizawa wouldn't let get hurt. He hurt because him. Yamada keeps safe. Hate him. Aizawa get hurt. Yagi wouldn't get rid of him, right? Izuku's thoughts came to a halt when he saw the hand reach out toward Tsu. Fear froze him in his place. The fingers froze as he touched Tsu's face. Izuku waited for the quirk to take effect, but nothing happened. Izuku stared at Aizawa. His eyes were glowing, small parts of his hair were floating, and pure rage and determination were written all over his face, despite the blood running down it. "Really cool, Eraserhead," he said, turning his attention away from them. Master Shigaraki, one of the students, managed to escape. "The pros will be coming soon," the purple mist announced as it appeared. That's unfair." Shigaraki whined. He began to rant and Izuku slowly tried to back away with his friends. "Already let Aizawa hurt, can't let anyone else hurt," Izuku thought while keeping himself in front of them. "Well, if this is how the game is going to end, I'm going to kill a few of these brats." "A gift for the heroes," Shigaraki said while reaching over to them. Izuku, without thinking, grabbed Shigaraki's wrist slowly and began to take his quirk. Shigaraki gave him a look of pure shock, as if he knew what he was doing. Izuku stopped taking his quirk as a loud bang came from the entrance. "I'm here." "Sorry for being late," Yagi said. Izuku had seen Yagi's other form, but this was the first time he saw it in person. Yagi ran towards Aizawa. Yagi reached Aizawa as Izuku grabbed Shinso and Tsu's hands to teleport closer to their teachers. Izuku immediately dropped to his knees to heal Aizawa. "Can't die, please don't die." "Young Midoriya, you need to get out of here," Yagi said, worried about them being involved in the battle. No. Can heal him. Aizawa, please be okay. I am so sorry, this is all my fault. I thought. Izuku rambled as he began to heal him. Izuku didn't even know he could heal someone, but that wasn't important right now. Nothing was more important than healing Aizawa at the moment. "Heal him somewhere else, please." "It's not safe here," Yagi pleaded. Izuku nodded. Then he teleported Aizawa away. Afterward, he teleported Shinso and Tsu away as well. When he returned to heal Aizawa, he started to feel dizzy and realized that he was using a lot of his energy. It didn't matter, he needed to heal Aizawa. He had to. Doesn't matter, cost doesn't matter. Need to help him. Shinso and Tsu watched Izuku with concern as he fell to his knees to heal Aizawa. They both noticed how he turned pale and looked ready to fall over. He must have used a lot of energy to teleport us all multiple times and now he's trying to heal him, Shinso worried aloud. And he managed to create that whirlpool earlier, after almost drowning, Tsu added. Should we try to stop him? He's already healed Sensei a lot. Ida should return soon with the other pros. Then Recovery Girl can heal Sensei, Shinso reasoned. Tsu nodded in agreement. But how can we convince him to stop? Tsu asked as Izuku continued to heal Aizawa, despite the sweat coming down his face and the way his arms and legs shook. I can try to put him under my control, but he knows how it works now. If it fails, then you can try to restrain him. But he can teleport, Tsu reminded him. I guess we could dash. I have fulfilled my duty and brought reinforcements, Ida announced while all the pros poured in. Vlad, Cementos, Nedzu, Ectoplasm, Midnight, and Present Mike were standing behind Ida. Shinso breathed out a sigh and Tsu's shoulders relaxed. A villain growled in anger and they started shooting. Present Mike laughed before activating his quirk. All the nearby villains were knocked over. Shinso thought Present Mike glanced at them, but after a moment his eyes returned to the fight. As all the villains grabbed their heads, Ectoplasm opened his mouth and white smoke filled the air. Then there were 7 of him. After Nedzu declares that they must protect all students, Tsu and Shinso turned to look at Deku again. He was somehow even paler and shaking all over. Shinso moved to sit next to him and tried to talk to him. Deku, the heroes are here. Aizawa can go to Recovery Girl now. So you can stop trying to heal him now. Deku? Shinso repeated. Deku, can you hear me? Shinso asked. Tsu moved to sit on Izuku's other side. Izuku? There was still no response. Tsu gently shook him and frowned as he failed to react. Hizashi bit his lip as he helped Tokoyami and Koda fight the villains in their area. Tokoyami was knocked down while fighting a villain with a water quirk and a villain who had a strength-enhancing quirk. Hisashi bent down to help Tokoyami up when he suddenly saw Shuta's face. He blinked it away and tried not to wonder what his husband had gone through. Shoyuta rarely was knocked down during a fight, but he was trying to protect all of his students virtually by himself. Focus on the fight, Present Mike reminded himself as a villain punched him in the gut. Yamada and the others took less than an hour to defeat the villains, but it felt like one of the longest hours of Yamada's life. By the time Nedza said, "We're all done here, everyone, please make sure all students are accounted for. As for those who are seriously injured, they should be immediately sent to Recovery Girl." Yamada bit his inner lip as he ran towards Aizawa and Izuku. He stopped a foot away to take a deep breath. He didn't want Izuku to think he was upset at him, and he wanted Izuku to feel like everything would be okay. If I go over there crying and trembling, then I'll only hurt Izuku. Shoulda. Izuku. Hey, I'm here, Yamada shouted, running towards them. Yamada. Healing. Swear. Can keep dash Izuku started. Tsu and Shinso stared in surprise. He'd just been completely out of it. He didn't hear an entire battle or recognize that he was being shaken, but he hears Present Mike yelling normally at him? Shinso mouthed in surprise to Tsu, who shrugged. Izuku, stop. How long have you been using your quirk? Yamada asked sternly while his eyes shined with worry. Doesn't matter dash. Before Izuku could continue, Yamada gently pulled Izuku away from Aizawa. Yamada hugged him tightly before he addressed the other two. If you're uninjured, head to one of your other teachers. We want to make sure everyone is safe and accounted for. Shinso nodded and left slowly. Tsu stayed a little longer and patted Izuku's shoulder before leaving. Yamada smiled at Izuku and then let him go. Izuku, please. It's going to be okay. I swear, Yamada said, but Izuku still wanted to heal Aizawa as much as he could. Kid, please, Yamada pleaded. Izuku was really exhausted, and he allowed himself to stop fighting. Yamada went over to his husband, holding his hand to comfort them both. He was speaking to him, but Izuku couldn't hear them. Soon Aizawa was getting medical attention. Izuku wasn't aware of his surroundings anymore. He felt lightheaded, and he kept swaying. He felt so disconnected from everything. Yamada tapped on Izuku's shoulder. He stared at Yamada before hugging him tightly. He started to break down crying, and Yamada hugged him while rubbing circles into his back. He needed to let it all out. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It's all my fault, please forgive me. I'm sorry. Izuku, sweetie, please don't cry. It's not your fault, none of this is your fault. No one is mad at you. Mom? Izuku thought to himself. He was so surprised he stopped crying and wiped the snot away from his nose on his sleeve. He felt Yamada gently leading him somewhere, and he allowed himself to be led while he cleaned his tears. All too quickly, they arrived in Recovery Girl's room. Izuku stared at All Might and Mirio blankly for a few minutes. You should sit down after all of that, Izuku, Mirio suggested somberly. Izuku continued to stare sadly until Yamada gently pushed him closer to the chair. Izuku sat down woodenly and stared at his hands. Izuku stayed quiet the whole time. He didn't say anything when Yagi told Mirio that he shortened the time he could hold his form. He stayed silent when the police officer came in and talked to Yagi about the incident. He stayed quiet when the officer mentioned his quirk, and the other three in the room frowned as Izuku failed to excitedly ask after his quirk. Mirio congratulated Yagi, Izuku, and Yamada for holding their own during the incident, and Izuku just frowned harder. Mirio agreed that all of them, including Izuku, fought as hard as pros and did well. Mirio even ruffled Izuku's hair then. Izuku just apologized quietly. Eventually, Izuku moved to sit next to Aizawa and started crying again. Meanwhile, Bakugo frowned as Yamada led Deku away. After he and Kirishima finished fighting, Kirishima insisted that they go check on him. Bakugo growled but followed him until they spotted the nerd. He was in the middle of the action. He saw the crusty villain reach toward him. He was about to run over there, when Deku grabbed his wrist. Instantly the villain froze and stared at him. He stared back for a few seconds before he pulled away and ran off. What the hell was that nerd doing? Today is an easy lesson. You'll state your name and then briefly talk about your family in English. For example, "Hi, I'm Hisashi Yamada. I have no siblings and my parents are celebrating their 57th anniversary this year." See how easy it is? You'll all take a turn, and if we finish early, then you can take that time to catch up on assignments. The whole class stared at him with blank faces. Yayarozu and Ida didn't even raise their hands. Present Mike frowned and waited a bit. He didn't like forcing students to answer. He turned to Izuku to see if he was up for the assignment, and Yamada's shoulders slumped. Izuku wasn't even looking at him. Ever since the incident, Present Mike has been watching Izuku. Every day in English class, Izuku sat down and stared unseeingly at the wall. He never sneezed, coughed, pulled his notebook out, or reacted to his classmates. When his classmates walked in and noticed him slumped in Present Mike's swivel chair, they hesitantly approached him and tried to ask him how he was doing. Izuku didn't give any indication that he heard them, not even a blink. Some of them continued to try to get his attention for a few days before they finally gave up. "Why don't you go first, Yayarozu? You were really excited to go first last week?" When she didn't immediately stand up and nod, he added, "I'm sure the class would feel more comfortable sharing after observing their student representative give an amazing introduction. Hello, I'm Momo Yayarozu. I have no siblings and my parents are celebrating their anniversary in May." "Thank you, Yayarozu. Who wants to go next?" After she went, everyone said essentially the same thing except Ida, Todoroki, Kaminari, and Azui. "Hello, I am Tenya Ida. I have one sibling, Tensei, and my parents are celebrating their anniversary in September." "Hi, I'm Tsuyu Azui. I have two siblings, Samidare and Satsuki, and my parents are celebrating their anniversary next month." "Hello, I'm Shoto Todoroki and I have two siblings, Natsuo and Fuyumi." Kaminari noticed how sad and quiet everyone has been since the incident. He didn't like that. He knew people needed time to be sad, but they also had to feel other things. Or else they'd forget what it's like to not be sad. He made sure to go last so that he could think of something funny to say. "Hey, I'm Denki Kaminari and I have no siblings." The moment after my mom and dad laid eyes on me, they both turned to each other. Then my mom said, "No more kids, I'm just kidding." They both looked at each other and smiled. Later though, when I electrocuted the television and my dad's gaming system in the same afternoon, they decided that one of me was more than enough, Kaminari joked while watching how everyone reacted. A few people laughed and relaxed their shoulders. During the whole speech, Deku fidgeted before becoming a statue once more. Denki and Yamada were the only ones to notice the slight twitch, but it brought a faint smile to both their faces. Once Kaminari finished, Yamada glanced at his phone and noticed that there were 20 minutes left. He suppressed a groan and sat on his desk as he slowly graded tests until it was time for the class to leave. As soon as lunch started and the kids left, he closed the door and sunk to the floor. He sat there with his head on his knees before he got up, and his ankle spasmed badly. He frowned and prodded Izuku to get up. As usual, Izuku didn't, and Yamada had to gently pull his arms to get him up. Once he was up, Yamada grabbed his sleeve and guided him back to his dorm. He held on until they reached a sofa. Last time he let go, Izuku just slid down to the floor and curled into a ball. Once Izuku was seated, Yamada made him 2 meals and tried to get him to choose one. He didn't react, and Yamada sighed as he left them in front of him. Yamada knew he'd pick them up later without either of them being touched. He sat on the sofa next to him and talked to him about the latest superhero save he had read about. Izuku didn't say anything and Yamada eventually stopped. He laid there slightly curled up while staring at the ceiling. He closed his eyes for a second and inhaled deeply before opening them. Then he gently pulled Izuku to his feet. Yamada grabbed his sleeve and wondered how long Izuku would be like this. Will he ever really recover? Yamada hoped he would, but Izuku sat down in class and stared without moving. He'd done that before, he could feel it, and he knew he felt just as guilty the first time. He felt his eyes burn as his stomach turned. Izuku knew he deserved to feel sick. It was all his fault. He'd seen the creature before. He'd helped create it. If he'd never helped, then Aizawa wouldn't be hurt. He knew that Yamada was angry with him. He had to be. It was only natural. Izuku had all these powers, and a healing quirk, yet he couldn't save one person. Why should Izuku get to eat and have fun when it was his fault that Aizawa was still asleep? He felt like everyone was staring at him, waiting for him to mess up so they could get rid of him. How could he allow himself to be comfortable when Aizawa was unconscious? Toshinori never felt more disappointed in himself than he did right now. He has had missions that have failed and he has had to deal with the aftermath of that. He learned a long time ago that the aftermath was always messy. Even when a mission goes well. When they fail, it's worse. However, this was different. It might have been because Toshinori cared about Aizawa and Izuku. Or maybe it was the knowledge that he could have prevented Aizawa's injuries if he was there. Guilt had been eating him up for the past 3 days. It was also difficult watching Izuku fall apart. He had been a mess after the attack. He hasn't been taking proper care of himself since the attack. He was refusing to eat, sleep, and leave Aizawa. Sure, he allowed himself to be walked to class with Yamada and go to the dorm for lunch, but if he or Yamada stayed with Aizawa, then he wouldn't allow anyone to move him. He was either concerningly silent or profusely apologizing to Yamada and Toshinori about the attack. Even after they told him multiple times that there was no need to, he still kept apologizing. He was convinced that it was somehow his fault. Hizashi was carrying a tray for him and Izuku. While Izuku refused to eat lunch and breakfast, Hizashi was determined to get him to eat dinner. He had to, or else Shoyuta would kill him. He entered the room and took in the depressing sight. It has been a disheartening few days. Hizashi hadn't felt this lonely in a long time, not since Oboro. Shoyuta is still alive, Hizashi reminded himself. Hey little listener. I brought something for you to eat, Hizashi said, trying to cheer him up. Izuku was sitting at the end of the bed staring at Aizawa, refusing to take his eyes off of him. Thanks, Yamada, but I'm not hungry, Izuku said. Izuku, please, Hizashi pleaded. I'm really not hungry, Izuku repeated himself. Hizashi sighed and set the trays down. He pulled out a chair and sat beside Izuku. Izuku, I know this has been hard for you, but you need to take care of yourself, Hizashi said worriedly. Izuku didn't move or react, so Hizashi slowly placed his hand on his shoulder. Please look at me, Hizashi pleaded. He didn't expect Izuku to actually look at him. Seeing how exhausted he was broke his heart. How can you even look at me right now? Izuku asked with bright eyes. Izuku, I am not mad at you. There is no possible way this is related to you, Hizashi assured. But it is. I recognize Nomu, Izuku confessed. Hizashi froze. What did that even mean? He recognized it, so that means his father was involved. That is impossible, though. Hizashi was snapped out of his thoughts when Izuku started to cry silently. No wonder he has been blaming himself. If he recognized the Nomu, then that would mean it had something to do with All for One. Hizashi was mentally cursing himself out. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Hizashi asked gently. I was scared that I would get in trouble, he confessed. Hizashi hugged Izuku. Izuku, we aren't going to blame you for anything that happened to you. You were a kid, you still are a kid, it's not your fault, Hizashi said, and Izuku started to break down. Izuku shook and snot fell down his face as Yamada gently patted his back. It was a struggle to convince Izuku to get some sleep and eat, but Hizashi somehow managed to do it. All those days of sleep deprivation and starvation must have finally caught up with him, Hizashi thought sadly. He went to look for Yagi and found him very quickly. Yamada, what are you doing here? Yagi asked in surprise. Hey Yagi, I managed to get Izuku to finally eat and sleep, Hizashi said with a small smile. Good, what's wrong then? Did something happen to Aizawa? He asked. It's Izuku. He recognized the Nomu, Hizashi said. Yagi's shock and horror were obvious, and Hizashi sat down. Hizashi stayed quiet for a few minutes to let Yagi process the implications of his last statement. I just want to know this. Is there a possibility that All for One is still alive? He asked. Yagi cracked his neck while pacing. Hizashi watched and waited patiently. I was sure I killed him in our last battle. However, with this attack and Izuku being able to recognize the Nomu, I will need to investigate to give a clear answer, Yagi said grimly. So you're unclear? Hizashi asked. Yagi nodded, and Hizashi let out a long sigh. We need answers as soon as possible, Hizashi said. I agree. All for One was a cruel man. He took the lives of many and hid behind ideas that appealed to those society abandoned. He was very manipulative and always seemed to plan 10 steps ahead. He took the lives of many heroes who threatened his power, including my own mentor. If he found out that Izuku was still alive, he'd stop at nothing to get to him. Even though he's here surrounded by many pro-heroes? Yamada asked nervously. Absolutely. He'll ill us and our students if he thinks it's the best way to get Izuku back. Though he might just slowly hurt those close to Izuku until he agrees to return, Yagi replied with a frown. Izuku would go back if he thought it would save others, Yamada agreed with furrowed eyebrows. We've heard some of what he made Izuku do. Even if All for One is badly injured from the fight, Izuku is relatively healthy and would be one of his most dangerous allies, Yagi pointed out. I don't think he'd be able to go through that again. We have to come up with a plan in case All for One is alive, Yamada worried. We will, but right now, you need to be with your husband and Izuku. They need you, Yagi said. Hizashi nodded. How are you holding up? Yagi asked. Hizashi let out a harsh laugh. I am managing, he said coldly. I am sorry for, Yagi began before Hizashi cut him off. Don't blame yourself, Yagi. We should be grateful that everyone came out alive, Hizashi advised. There's no need to sulk now for now. Right now, let's just focus on the positives, he continued. Yagi smiled and nodded in agreement. Hizashi went to check on Izuku. He was still asleep, good, he definitely needs it. Then he went to check on his husband. He sat down next to him and took in the view that was his mummified husband. I know we've both ended up in hospitals before, but it's never been this serious of an injury. Last time you ended up in the hospital, you spent a day and a half begging me to sneak our cat in to see you. Because he's always liked me better than you. I finally gave in and brought the cat into the room, and then you both just fell asleep. The cat was curled up on your elbow and your hand was right next to its head. I still have the picture on my other phone. Hizashi laughed and gave him a short kiss on the cheek. I know you were just protecting them. You did a great job, but you scared the hell out of me. You are never going to hear the end of it, understand? Hizashi lightly scolded his unconscious husband. He waited as if expecting a response. Then he grabbed his hand, squeezed it a little tightly, and pressed a small kiss to it. Wake up soon, Shoyuta. I miss you. How did that brat do it? Tamura sat at the bar, but he was deep in thought. He is just a background character, not even in their class. So how could he have done that? Tamura cursed to himself while trying to figure it all out. Was it just a weird side effect of an eraser quirk? That makes sense, but I don't know the answer. He teleported Eraserhead and his friends away, too. He was also healing Eraserhead. No, there is more to that brat. He isn't a side character. Tamura concluded. Don't be discouraged by this. You will face many failures and successful missions. This is just one of those failures, his master said. Tamura didn't respond to his master as he normally would. He was debating on how to bring this brat up. What is wrong, Tamura? You seem distracted, his master asked, concerned. Might as well bite the bullet. You know how there is a kid in Class 1A under the hero's protection? Tamura said. Yes, our source assured us he wasn't a threat. Were they wrong? His master asked, slightly upset at the source. No, I don't think they're wrong. More so unaware. Thanks to the heroes, Tamura said before continuing, he struck me as odd. His quirk was interesting. Well, what did he do, Tamura? He asked. He has more than one quirk. Some kind of healing quirk, a teleporting quirk, and a quirk that takes someone's quirk, Tamura finally said. What? His master was stunned by what he had just said. Yes, he almost took my quirk, but didn't. I am sure that was what he was trying to do. Based on what you have told me, Tamura continued. Tamura, what did this boy look like? His master said. Green hair, green eyes, had freckles, and he had a round face, Tamura said. But that is impossible. He is still alive? His master said, speaking more to himself. Tamura was even more confused now. Who is he? How do you know him? Tamura asked, somewhat demandingly. We will need to confirm his name as soon as possible. I believe you ran into my son, All for One said. Tamura saw red for a moment. Just a moment, He wanted to yell and scream, however hearing how surprised his master sounded kept him grounded. Your son? He repeated. Twice. When quirks first started showing up. When I manifested my quirk, I had a family at the time. A wife and a son. My son also had my quirk. My wife put up a difficult fight to keep him from me. But I did have him with me until he escaped. After he dealt with my wife. I searched for him but never found him. I thought he was dead as the years passed. I never thought my wife would have found a way to keep him alive after all these years. Tamura listened to his master and felt sorry that his master thought he had lost his son. But now, if there is a chance he is alive. Do not worry about it, Tamura. I will take care of him, All for One said. Will you need my help at? Tamura asked. I will let you know if I need your assistance, he said. All for One ended the call soon after. His head was spinning. He couldn't believe it. Izuku was alive, and he was going to bring him home. Dr. Kyudai? All for One called. He came over as soon as he was called. Yes, sir? What do you need? He asked. I need you to make a new Nomu. A very specific one, All for One said. Yes, sir, what will this Nomu be doing? I need this Nomu to capture someone specifically. Fucking hell, what the fuck happened? Shoyuta thought as a tremendous amount of pain coursed through his body. He tried to open his eyes and, to his surprise, he couldn't. What the? Shoyuta began before he heard some rustling. He quickly sat up and he felt his spine pop as he did so. His hand moved to touch one of his elbows as he saw flashes of what happened. Someone said something and then a thing grabbed him and crushed his face. His elbows were both broken as it gave a loud shriek. He tried to use his quirk, but he was just left feeling useless, unable to escape, and worried about his kids. He trembled as he heard the man threaten one of his kids. He saw his face and felt a surge of adrenaline. I won't allow another person I care about to be hurt when I can still move. He wasn't sure who was about to be killed. He noticed that Izuku, Shinso, and Tsuyu were near there. He just knew he wouldn't let it happen. He threw his head up as far as it would go and glared at the man. He kept staring as blood ran down his face and his eyes burned. He continued to stare until his face was slammed into the ground. Are Izuku and Tsuyu safe? Shoyuta asked anxiously as he pulled off his bandages. He saw Izuku and was surprised when he hugged him. It was a little too hard, but he tried to keep the wince off his face. Shoyuta hugged Izuku back until he let go. Then he looked him over slowly. I'm glad you're okay. Are Tsuyu and Shinso safe? He asked Hizashi and him. Asking after Minyu Shoyuta? Hizashi teased before answering him. Everyone is safe, Shoyuta. Only you and 13 were extremely injured. So, welcome back to the land of the living, Shoyuta, Hizashi half-heartedly jokes. It's nice to be back, I guess, Shoyuta said sarcastically. I can heal you if you're in more pain. Izuku said. No, you still need more rest before using any of your quirks, Hizashi scolded. But I can dash. I said no, Izuku. Until you get a full night of sleep, you are not allowed to use any quirks, okay? Hizashi told him. Izuku sighed and Shoyuta felt Hizashi grab his hand. Healing? Izuku, you have a healing quirk? Shoyuta asked. Why yeah, I also found out I have a water manipulation quirk too, Izuku added. Well, it looks like we will need to add that to our training, Shoyuta noted. Hey, Izuku, how about you go get more rest, Hizashi suggested. You said I could be here when Aizawa wakes up, he protested. Hizashi sighed. All right, but only if you promise to get some rest. Deal. Izuku promised. Shoyuta watched Hizashi set his hands on his left hand, but he was in so much pain that he didn't really feel it. Problem, child, you haven't been resting? Shoyuta worriedly realized. He hesitated. Don't worry about that, Shoyuta. You should focus on yourself right now. We should discuss the condition you are in, Hizashi said. Shoyuta groaned in response. Just tell me when I can leave so I can get back to work, Shoyuta said. Aizawa, you can't work in this state. Izuku argued. I will be fine. How long, Hizashi? Shoyuta said, getting back to the point. Not going to tell you. Anyway, your injuries, your arms were broken, you had a few broken ribs, and a broken skull as well, Hizashi said. Has my quirk been affected in any way? Shoyuta asked. If you mean if it's been damaged, then it's not as bad as I thought it would, Izuku said suddenly. Shoyuta was a little surprised to hear from Izuku, since there would be no reason for him to know his medical status. You really need to explore that more, Hisashi commented. Why yeah, I will work on it too, Izuku said sheepishly. Explore what? Shoyuta asked, a little annoyed to be left out. Izuku can't read quirks. Basically, he can tell how strong someone's quirk is, Hisashi explained. Anyway, your quirk is fine, it just won't be as long, Hisashi said, getting back on topic. I see, well it's not as bad as I thought it would be, Shoyuta said. Yeah, Izuku, I think it's time you go rest, Hisashi said. But I want to dash. Please, just for a while, Hisashi pleaded. Izuku squeezed Shuta's hand tightly and then loosened his grip. Okay, Izuku relented. He let go of Shuta's hand. Hisashi also released Shuta's hand to escort Izuku out of the room. Shoyuta sat in silence, processing everything he had learned. He heard his husband come back into the room. He grabbed his hand and heard a loud sigh. You scared the hell out of me, Hisashi scolded. I'm sorry Dash. Don't start that right now. I get it's our job, but still. Seeing you like that, Hisashi trailed off. We learned something about the villains, Hisashi finally said. Shoyuta mentally prepared himself for the worst-case scenario. We think All for One is still alive, Hisashi said. Okay, so I wasn't prepared for that. What? Was the only thing Shoyuta could say. I know, we still aren't sure and Dash Hisashi was cut off by Shoyuta. How? Yagi told us he was dead. Does Izuku know? What are you going to do? Shoyuta started to rapidly fire questions. Why the hell is Izuku still here? He was at the attack and needed to be somewhere safe and… Shoyuta, I know this is a lot, but I need you to be level-headed, Hisashi snapped Shoyuta out of his head. Sir, what are we going to do? Shoyuta asked. We need a plan to keep Izuku safe. Anything would be fine. We just needed a plan. Right now, we upped security at the hospital. Luckily, no one is questioning it since there are a lot of pros here. I've been watching Izuku since the incident and he's been to my classes with me. When I'm not teaching, we're here. We've been using a disguise since you've been in the hospital, mostly to prevent the media from questioning why he's here, and it's worked so far. We're also considering keeping him in UA and he needs to be with a licensed hero 24/7, Hisashi explained. Hisashi, it sounds like we're keeping him in a prison, Shoyuta pointed out. I don't like it either, Shoyuta, Hisashi said. Shoyuta sighed. Geez, the universe can't give this kid a break, can it? Shoyuta could only sit and curse at whatever god was out there. Izuku had been through enough. The least that could happen to him was for his abusive, poor excuse of a father to be actually dead. The possibility that he was even alive. Aizawa felt two things about this idea. On one hand, his heart broke for Izuku, now having to worry that his dad was still alive. On the other hand, he wanted to find the bastard and kill him. Despite the urge to go looking for him, he was smart enough to know he couldn't accomplish that. Fucking hell. Hisashi, Shoyuta said. I know, I know, Hisashi said as he held his husband's hand. I think we should have two plans prepared, Shoyuta suggested to Hisashi. Two? Hisashi questioned. Yes, for if we manage to avoid All for One's attention or are compromised. That's a good idea, Hisashi agreed. We also shouldn't tell Nedzu about either of them, Hisashi added. Naturally, he might decide to experiment on Izuku or something, Shoyuta pointed out. Hisashi shuddered and nodded. If we can't take Izuku away, for whatever reason, who can we trust to take care of him that won't easily be connected to us? We should make a list and start contacting them to ask after I get out of the hospital, Shoyuta stated. And we can ask Yagi to do the same, Hisashi added. Shoyuta made a face but nodded. We also need to find places abroad to take Izuku to hide him, Shoyuta added while pulling his phone out. Hisashi sat next to him. Shoyuta leaned on him. Needing the comfort, don't forget yourself, Shoyuta. You went through a lot too, Hisashi pointed out and set Aizawa's phone aside. I won't, it's not like you'll let me, Shoyuta half-joked while trying to grab his phone back. Are you joking? Hisashi teased. Don't start now, Shoyuta groaned. Ah, come on. Let me have this. Hisashi said as he carefully wrapped his arm around Shoyuta and moved his phone farther away. Hey, careful, I still have ribs that just got repaired, Shoyuta scolded. Hisashi laughed, which made Shoyuta feel a lot better after the conversation they had. As the laughter died down, there was a moment of silence. Hey, we will get through this, Hisashi said, breaking the silence. Like we always have, Shoyuta said. Hisashi chuckled, leaned closer, and gave him a light kiss on the cheek. I can't kiss you yet, but this will do, Hisashi said. Shoyuta was thankful his face was bandaged, as he could swear his face was red as a tomato. Hisashi, however, probably knew it was always easy to make Shoyuta flustered. I love you, Hisashi said. I love you too, Shoyuta responded. Izuku quietly walked to Yagi's door and quickly shut the door behind himself. Yagi, Aizawa's finally awake. Young Midoriya, what are you? Yagi cut himself off after he realized what Izuku said. Is he alright? Should I go visit? I wish they'd allow me to heal him more, but he's talking and moving around. He even wanted to return to work already. Izuku pouted. I wanted to talk to you for a bit. I'm worried about Aizawa. He was already in danger before, but now I'm worried he'll be hurt even worse, Izuku confided. What do you mean, young Midoriya? I think my dad is alive because of the Nomu, and I think he might know I am now too, Izuku trailed off nervously. You look nothing like your father, so I'm sure his allies wouldn't recognize you. That is a good point, but young Midoriya? Yagi asked nervously. Not only did I use a water manipulation quirk, a teleportation quirk, and a healing quirk. I may have panicked for a moment and tried to take a quirk. And he may have recognized the feeling. I saw this look of shock and recognition when I tried to. I didn't take it, but I'm really scared he already told all for one, Izuku admitted quietly. Yagi stared at him in shock and worry for a moment before offering him a hug. Izuku accepted it for a few minutes before he squirmed out of his hold and stared at him with worry. You know I'm going to have to tell them, right? Yagi asked. Izuku nodded his head. I know, but I didn't want to tell them right after Aizawa woke up. Izuku raced to the door and with his hand on the handle, he said, and you won't either. I was sternly sent by Yamada to bed about an hour ago. So if you tell him, they'll kill us both. Me for not going to sleep and you for letting me come in here and talk for so long, Izuku told him before running back to his room. Yagi's face paled as Izuku mentioned Yamada and Aizawa. They would kill him. I'll tell them he told me earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt their moment, Yagi promised himself. Izuku hated sleeping. Wow, what a surprise. The downside of being someone who hates sleeping is that you'll try to avoid it. Izuku avoided sleeping like it was the plague. He would do anything to avoid sleeping. Aizawa maybe have had a terrible sleep schedule, but Izuku was basically trying to beat him. And he won by a long shot. Can you honestly blame him? Izuku had been asleep for about 300 years and now, whenever he fell asleep, he relived his horrible life. The worst part was he could never recall his nightmares, just the negative emotions afterward. It drove him a little nuts. So, in order to keep his sanity, he just tried to avoid sleeping. It wasn't difficult for him to stay up. But Yamada and Aizawa made it hard. They wanted him to get proper rest, but Izuku was having none of it. Whenever Izuku stayed up all night and was caught, it triggered a fight that morning. However, ever since USJ, Izuku has tried his best to listen to them. He didn't want to burden them any more than he already did, so he pushed his feelings down. It's just now they were staying with him more. It was weird. He was used to them leaving and then coming back in the morning. However, they stayed more and more. It freaked him out a little. They started asking him more questions about his nights. He either deflected their questions or flat out ignored them. He didn't want to worry them. It was just better not to say anything. Tonight was no different. Good night, Izuku said after finishing another movie night. Good night, little listener, Yamada replied. Hey, problem child, if you have a rough night, you can come get us, okay? Aizawa said, while staring at him intensely. During the movie, Izuku kept almost falling asleep. He would close his eyes for 1 second before he began to lurch forward. He jerked himself awake and tried to glance around discreetly. Aizawa was worried about his sleeping habits. As they began to stay there longer, Aizawa noticed more and more hints that Izuku was struggling. He seemed to be more tired lately. Izuku continued his training while Aizawa observed. They mostly trained his new quirks since Izuku was worried Aizawa would be hurt if they sparred so soon. During training, Izuku's movements were more clumsy and his reaction time had grown alarmingly. Aizawa didn't want to force him to talk if he didn't want to. Aizawa certainly had no right to talk about sleep schedules. He hoped that if Izuku's troubles continued, he would eventually feel comfortable talking to them about it. Or slip up. I will, Izuku lied. There was a moment of silence before he said, "All right, problem child." Izuku went to his room and closed his eyes for 1 second. They were just so heavy. Izuku lay down as his thoughts slowly drifted away. Izuku waited for his nightmare to begin. He waited and waited. Why wasn't the dream beginning? Izuku looked around and realized he was somewhere unfamiliar. A completely different place than he was used to. Where was he? It was a dark room filled with chairs. All but 2 had silhouettes in them. Izuku squinted at the blurry figures in confusion. Before the scenery rapidly changed and one of the blurry figures moved closer to him. "Izuku?" a familiar voice asked from the blurry figure. Izuku walked closer and froze. "What? Izuku," his uncle repeated, staring at his nephew. Izuku stared right back at his uncle. "Yoichi, how was he here? Was this all in his head?" "Why, Yoichi?" were the only words that Izuku could force out of his mouth. The 2 remained still as they processed one another. As the shock began to wear off, Izuku jumped right into his uncle's arms. Yoichi reacted by hugging him tightly. "Are you? Is this really you?" Izuku asked, not confident that he was real. "I just feel guilty that Yoichi suffered to protect me. He can't actually be here, right? As much as I wish he could be." "Why? It's me, I am real, I swear," he cried. He felt his eyes burn. Both from guilt and relief. He gave up looking for Izuku and Inko a long time ago. He had hoped that they escaped his brother. One way or the other. Though as he stared at his nephew, he felt angry that he had given up like that. He squeezed his nephew harder while tears ran down his face. Izuku somehow felt that this really was his uncle. Izuku started to cry and hugged his uncle back just as tightly. "Yoichi, it's really you?" Yes, it is me," Yoichi assured him while he brushed his tears away. I miss you so much. I have been so alone and I don't know what to do and I'm sorry." Izuku started to ramble after he pulled away from Yoichi. "Sorry? Sorry for what? I should be apologizing to you. I should have looked for you. I am sorry for not looking. I should have done more for you and your mother," Yoichi apologized while staring at the ground. "You did the best you could. You know we would never be mad at you," Izuku said. The 2 chuckled at the insanity of everything. Then Izuku added, "I don't remember much, but from what I do know, my father was horrible. You suffered whenever you protected me. I'm glad you eventually escaped him, even if it was without me. You ended up spending years working to save people from him. I'm proud of you and I have a feeling Mom would be too." Yoichi smiled at him gratefully, and he promised himself that he'd do whatever he could to protect Izuku this time. "Where are we?" Izuku asked after a moment of silence. "I do not know the answer either," Yoichi said, though he did have a vague idea of where they were. "Yoichi, I don't know what to do," Izuku said. "What do you mean?" Yoichi asked nervously. "I don't know how to handle my new life. I finally was getting used to this life, but no matter how hard I try, my past keeps coming back," Izuku explained angrily. "Izuku, they say to leave the past behind you, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you need to face your past in order to move on," Yoichi advised. Izuku listened and wondered how he was going to accomplish that. "You don't have to do that today. You should take your time. You'll be able to face your demons when you are ready," Yoichi promised him with a small smile. "Thank you, I don't think I'll ever be ready to face them, but maybe one day I will be able to," Izuku said. "And I'll try to help you along the way," Yoichi promised. He hoped he would be able to keep it this time. "Are you happy? Or happier?" Yoichi asked. While he knew some of what Izuku was going through, he hadn't seen it all himself. And he knew Izuku was skilled at hiding his darker emotions. Aizawa and Yamada have helped me a lot. They also have these adorable cats they let me see sometimes. And I have friends now. There are these 3 slightly older students who were my first friends after waking up. They showed me lots of interesting things and were fun to hang out with. Then I started attending class with Aizawa, and most of class 1A are my friends. They all have different interests that they like to share with me. Izuku frowned suddenly as he thought of a conversation he had with Yaoyorozu. Do you think Mom is proud of me? Izuku asked. Yoichi smiled as he fixed Izuku's hair. Of course, she is proud of you. You are here and trying to start a new life. She would be so proud that you're even here, Yoichi assured him with a bright smile. Izuku's eyes began to water. Yoichi noticed and hugged him gently. I missed you, Izuku. I'm sorry again for not saving you and your mother, Yoichi repeated quietly. Missed you too, Yoichi, Izuku said. His tears stopped as something began to happen. The place began to look blurry. Yoichi? Izuku asked uncertainty. I think you are waking up, Yoichi pointed out. What? So soon? No please, not yet. I want to stay longer, Izuku said as he clung to his uncle. Not now. He wanted to stay just a little longer. He wanted to be with his family. Don't worry, Izuku. We will see each other soon. I know we will, Yoichi promised. Everything was starting to fade. Izuku wasn't ready, not yet. Izuku, listen, I am so proud of you. Please, take care of yourself, was the last thing Yoichi said to him. After Izuku left, Yoichi was returned to his chair. The heroes surrounding him all sent him looks. While some were sympathetic, others were hard and slightly angry. The worst had to be the look of pure disappointment the second user sent him. I'm sorry, Yoichi, but we couldn't allow him to see us, not when he's his son, one of the figures explained to him. Izuku woke up and felt a flood of emotions. He felt more awake than he had been in a long time. He felt simultaneously euphoric and disappointed. He jolted up and searched his bedroom with his eyes. He felt his disappointment win as he realized he was awake. He stretched his limbs as he felt tears hit his hand. He sniffled and curled into a ball. It felt like hours when he finally decided to get up. His eyes felt heavy and his throat felt raw. He went downstairs and was a little surprised to see Aizawa and Yamada weren't there. Izuku didn't want to dwell on it. He simply went to the bathroom to get himself ready for the day. He noticed how much of a mess he looked in the mirror. He brushed it off, really not wanting to deal with it. Little listener, you up? Yamada shouted. Yeah, I'm up, Izuku shouted back. He left the bathroom to see Yamada in the kitchen cooking. Aizawa was in his sleeping bag. Wow, you look worse than Shoyuta, Yamada joked. Izuku shrugged and Aizawa reached for a shopping bag. Here, Aizawa tossed a green sleeping bag to Izuku. What's this for? Izuku asked. In case you need to rest, you can sleep in it, Aizawa said. I really don't. Izuku was cut off. Really don't care, I'm tired, Aizawa said firmly. He fell to the ground due to his exhaustion. Izuku heard Yamada laugh at his husband. Izuku stared at his sleeping bag. What the hell? He thought and shrugged. Izuku grabbed it, put it on, and sat down next to Aizawa. Aizawa sat up and Izuku used him as a human pillow. He quickly fell asleep and Aizawa watched him peacefully fall asleep with a tiny smile. Hiccup fell asleep right next to Aizawa, and Ace wanted to get Izuku's attention. So he pawed at Izuku's legs impatiently. Yamada came over from the kitchen to watch them rest together. If he managed to take a picture when Aizawa began to fall asleep, then it didn't wake any of them up. About a month had passed since the USJ incident. Izuku hadn't been in class for a month, as he was busy helping to heal Aizawa as much as he could, which left Izuku exhausted all the time. However, thanks to Aizawa's eagerness, they got back to class a lot sooner than expected. Yamada and Izuku were trying to convince Aizawa to rest. They failed miserably, but they remained determined. Deku! Everyone screamed on their first day back. Izuku was quickly tackled to the ground by Yurika. Shinso sighed half-heartedly and helped them both up. Immediately everyone surrounded them and asked Deku a million questions. Alright, everyone back off. He just got back here, give him some room to breathe, Shinso demanded sternly. Thanks Shinso, Izuku said, a bit overwhelmed by all the attention. Everyone else backed a few inches away in response to Shinsu's words and Izuku's stress. Enough, brats, Aizawa scolded while coming in. Promptly everyone but Deku went to sit down. Deku stood there with his arms crossed as he watched Aizawa come in. Sensei, shouldn't you be resting? Ida asked while staring at his injuries. Yes, he should, Izuku replied coldly. I have rested. I'm sure you students are aware of this, but in case you're not, the sports festival is coming up, Aizawa stated. The class erupted into cheers in response. Izuku moved to sit down and wondered why this was such a big deal. They've already seen each other fight and work together. Isn't it just like class training? Maybe they're excited to see the other class's strengths? But they don't find quirks as interesting as I do, Izuku thought to himself. Alright, calm down. This festival is very important as you will be able to accept internships and you will be learning from real pro heroes. So take this seriously, Aizawa warned. Everyone nodded in excitement. Izuku smiled at their excitement. After what happened to them and Aizawa, he was glad that everyone was in a good mood, even if he had no idea why they were in such a good mood. Once class was over, Izuku went to hang out with Uraraka, Shinso, Ida, and Tsu. Hey Deku, aren't you excited? Uraraka asked while they walked to Izuku's dormitory. Izuku asked. For the sports festival, Tsu answered. Not really, Izuku confessed. Really? Shinso asked in disbelief. I didn't know about the sports festival until recently. Kinda hard to be excited over something you don't know much about, Izuku confessed. He had no idea what the sports festival was until Yamada and Aizawa explained why they were suddenly even busier. He had thought they were working on something like the Olympics for students. Until he voiced that aloud and Yamada explained that students from every class competed in it but with their quirks instead of with sports equipment. You never watched the sports festival? Uraraka asked. Yeah, Izuku sheepishly admitted. He had considered watching one with the big three, but they assured him that it was pretty boring and he wasn't missing out. Though Izuku wondered why they looked embarrassed when he brought it up. We should show you some of the previous festivals then. Tsu announced. Yes, I think that would be fun. Uraraka said. Izuku giggled and decided why not. They all chose to watch the one from 2 years ago first. Izuku was surprised when he noticed that the big three were competing. And then he realized why they didn't want to watch them with him. He laughed and made a mental note to bring this up the next time he hung out with all three of them. I still think it's crazy how huge the robots the school uses are, Izuku commented absent-mindedly. The others all turned to look at him. What do you mean? Uraraka asked. I've mostly seen small robots. I haven't learned how to build any, but I have always found them interesting, so I tried to read about them when I could. I think the tallest I've ever read about was 8.5 meters. It is a technological marvel. Everyone was dash. They all laughed in response to what Izuku said. 8.5 meters hasn't been a technological marvel in centuries, Ida informed them with a small laugh. Oh, I guess my books were a bit outdated, Izuku laughed nervously. Ida offered to lend him a few more modern books, and then they continued watching the festival. Izuku couldn't help but wonder how much had changed. He had barely seen the world before he was frozen in ice, yet he still missed it. He wished he could have seen more before. How could he tell the difference now? Izuku waited with a slight smirk on his face for the big three to arrive. He had the television turned on and paused on a hilarious scene. He'd also written down 2 other times on an index card. As they walked in, Izuku smiled innocently at them. I was hanging out with my friends the other day. And they convinced me to watch some of the previous sports festivals, Izuku explained after they all sat down. Oh? Tagata asked nervously. Yep. The first one we watched was from 2 years ago. Hadu, Tagata, and Amajiki all stared at him, wide-eyed. It was amazing, so much so that I think we should watch it together. This moment was one of my favorites, Izuku continued while gesturing at the picture of a blurry Mirio attempting to put on his pants during a race. The other 2 laughed until they noticed the flash card in his hand. They all felt a little embarrassed as Izuku paused on their most embarrassing moments. After laughing for a bit, Izuku asked them how they felt during the festival and how much they've improved since then. They spent the rest of the day discussing quirks before they eventually decided to spar. And by which they decided to spar. It was really Izuku marveling at Tagata's quirks and how invincible they made him, while Amajiki sat in a corner too nervous to join, and Hadu tried to convince Amajiki to join. As the months passed, everyone was training more and tensions were high, to say the least. Izuku enjoyed watching everyone train and catching up on the past sports festivals that he missed out on. Aizawa and Yamada have been busy working their butts off for the sports festival. Izuku helped out as much as he could, though whenever he tried to help out, he was often pushed to the sidelines. It annoyed him a bit, but he understood, so he spent more time with his friends and the big three. Izuku sighed as he made his way to the sports festival with Snipe. They hadn't said it outright, but ever since the USJ incident, Izuku was being watched. Not only were Yamada and Aizawa keeping an eye on him, but so were the rest of the staff. While Kayama and Nedzu were much more subtle about it, teachers he had never seen before would strike up a conversation with him whenever he walked by unoccupied. He couldn't remember the last time he was alone for longer than a minute. He was also confident that Aizawa and Yamada were staying all night now. On the nights when he couldn't sleep, he'd listen and hear them talking or sleeping all night. Tensions were high because of the sports festival. Everyone was excited, nervous, and stressed out. "You guys will do great." Izuku encouraged Uraraka and Shinso. "Well, that's easy for you to see. You're not competing," Shinso pointed out. "The encouragement might help you in the competition," Ida said. "We should get going, the festival is about to start," Tsu reminded them. Izuku waved them goodbye and went inside to watch them. Aizawa and Yamada wanted Izuku to stay even more hidden now that it might be possible that his father was still alive. To make him feel like he was in the audience, they included a speaker that picked up the cheering of the audience and their commentary. There was also a camera that showed most of the crowd. Izuku hated being hidden away. He felt locked away but with more freedom. He really couldn't complain. At least he knew he was going to be safe. It just was a little annoying to deal with. Izuku pushed his feelings aside as all the green lights turned black. Izuku watched excitedly as the race began. Oh boy, was it intense. Izuku hadn't realized just how seriously they took this. Izuku smiled as Yamada started off his commentary. "And we're off to a racing start. How about some color commentary, mummy man?" Yamada asked with a teasing smile. "How did you talk me into this?" Aizawa grumbled. Izuku smiled, knowing exactly how. It was a compromise Aizawa agreed to in exchange for him and Izuku to stop seriously asking him to stay home. Aizawa probably thought we'd forget. Izuku thought to himself with a grin. What should we be paying attention to in the early stages of the race? Yamada asked. The doorway, Aizawa deadpanned. Izuku laughed before he focused on the race. He grimaced at how narrow it appeared. Everyone looked crushed, but the smaller students were trampled. Izuku leaned closer as Todoroki made his way through the doorway first. He froze the ground and managed to freeze some of the other students' boots. Izuku cheered as Shinso used his scarf to avoid Todoroki's trap and swing past everyone. Kaken, Deku used his explosions to catch up to Todoroki. Aoyama used his belly laser while smiling and winking, Momo created a pole, Tokoyami used dark shadow, and Mina yelled in alarm and jumped. She ended up trying to walk fast on the ice. Izuku had caught a glimpse of her shoes earlier and was sure that she was using the holes at the bottom to melt the ice with her acid so that she wouldn't fall on it. Izuku couldn't watch all of them at the same time, but he was sure the rest of 1A jumped when Todoroki got near the entrance. They awkwardly walked over the large patch of ice. Todoroki glanced back and blinked at the large number of people who dodged his ice. He kept running until a student was hit midair by a machine. It's the robots from the entrance exam, Izuku pointed out to All Might while he recalled the first time he saw his friends. Ooh, enemies have shown up out of nowhere, Present Mike noted. I bet we're in for a treat here. A test of strength and cunning. It's a robo-inferno, Present Mike announced. All the students stared up at the robots in front of them. It seemed like Todoroki was saying something to his classmates, but Izuku couldn't tell what it was. Then he hit the ground and ice surrounded him. As spikes grew, he spoke once more and then threw the ice at the robots. They were almost completely frozen and icy air puffed out of them. Izuku shivered at the cold look Todoroki had as he exhaled a frosty breath. Then he ran through a robot's legs. One of the robots he froze fell and smoke puffed out of it. That's Todoroki from Class 1A pulling ahead to an early lead with a devastating display. Amazing! He's the one we should watch. It almost seems unfair. Thoughts? Present Mike demanded. His attack was both offensive and defensive. No wonder he was let in on recommendations. He'd never even fought those Robo-Infernos before, but they didn't stand a chance against his chart-topping moves. The first-year students are already off to one rockin' start. And it's only the first round. Talk about a cruel obstacle course. Our players are racing against each other in a vicious battle where anything goes as long as they stay on the track, Present Mike said while gesturing wildly. Watch it, Aizawa warned as one of his arms came close to hitting him. We'll continue to bring you live updates and pulse-pounding action thanks to the camera robots placed around the course, Present Mike added. Why did you need me here? Aizawa groaned. The stakes are high. We have a whole school of top-notch students trying to be heroes, but do they really stand a chance against our heavy metal swarm of Robo-Infernos? Present Mike asked while ignoring Aizawa's question. Suddenly, everyone was gathered around the fallen robot. They looked a little frantic. Their faces quickly morphed to shock as Kirishima emerged from under the rubble. Kirishima from Class 1A. What a hardcore debut for this rookie. Present Mike cheered while Deku worried about how reckless Todoroki was being. How could he become a hero if he injured the nearby civilians? Deku worried to himself. Kirishima appeared to be admonishing the absent Todoroki, but he stopped when the rubble began to move again. A metallic boy emerged angrily. Tetsutisu from Class 1B was also stuck underneath. What are the odds? Present Mike laughed while explaining that they both have essentially the same quirk. Deku briefly wondered if he'd be able to discern a difference between their quirks if he could observe them both. But Tetsutisu didn't seem very friendly, so Deku would just have to watch them both closely during the sports festival. Some kids seemed to be combining their quirks so that they could get through the rubble easily. Izuku made notes on their quirks and their compatibility with each other until Yagi gently elbowed him. He'd missed some of it because he was completely zoned out. Class 1 as Bakugu is rocketing over the obstacles. Clever. Present Mike commented as Deku searched for the reason why Yagi elbowed him. Tokoyami used Dark Shadow to easily soar over the rubble, and the audience cheered loudly. Deku flinched in response and leaned closer to Yagi. Yagi gently rubbed his hair until the cheering quieted down. Looks like all the pack leaders are from Class 1A. At least for now, Snipe observed. It's not that Class 1B and the other students are doing poorly. It's just, Yagi began to explain before Aizawa's voice floated through the stadium and into the room they were watching it from. Class 1as learned not to hesitate. Yagi smiled at Aizawa finishing his thoughts and Deku laughed quietly. He knew Aizawa would be annoyed to hear that he had more in common with Yagi than Present Mike did. Similar forces repel each other after all. Izuku thought to himself with a grin. What are you laughing about? Yagi asked curiously. I'll tell you later, Izuku promised. Hopefully, Yagi will forget because if he tells Aizawa then I won't get to see the Big Three's sports festival in person this year. Ida ran up to a robot and kicked it out of commission. Then Jairu electrocuted two. They fell as she walked away. Kaminari jumped onto one and electrocuted it. They've seen what the real world is like. They felt the fear of facing villains, Aizawa continued. Izuku softly cheered as Uraraka dropped 3 with her quirk and they became extremely damaged. Ojiro quickly destroyed one with his tail. I wonder where he learned martial arts. He looks so cool whenever he uses it. He must have worked very hard to become this skilled. They all have. Izuku thought to himself, while more robots were destroyed. They've grown all of them. And they know that they have to act quickly if they want to stay alive, Aizawa finished. Shinso was swinging by a robot when it suddenly chose to target him. It knocked him down quickly. Shinso had barely blinked before Uraraka appeared and touched it. They spoke for a few seconds before they parted ways. Izuku smiled at how embarrassed Shinso was. He was sure he caught her winking at him. So she must have helped him to thank him for his help with the entrance exam. Deku noticed that Shinso slouched once Uraraka left. Is he worried about the robots? Or is something else bothering him? Izuku wondered to himself. Shinso watched Uraraka leave with a frown. It was nice of her to help him, but that just made him feel worse. His quirk wasn't helpful for this portion of the test. He couldn't brainwash the robots. He frowned and kicked a rock. It hit a nearby scrap from a robot Todoroki took down. He decided to pick it up and use it as a shield. He watched other students use their quirks to breeze past the robots. They fell easily. Yet Shinso had to carefully avoid them. He once again wished he'd been born with a more heroic quirk. One like his parents. One that would be flashy and admired by his peers. While every child dreams of being a hero and are told they can become one by their parents and teachers, he had never heard those words. No one supported Shinso when he applied to UA. His whole life, he was told that his quirk was evil and he should either hide it or become a villain. But he wanted to be a hero, even with his villainous quirk. You're better off dodging those big fellas most of the time. But if you gotta take 'em down, they're just slow, dumb hunks of metal pretty easy to hit. Long as you land a smart shot, that is, Snipe explained. For those of you who thought the first obstacle was easy, let's see how you feel about the second one, Present Mike exclaimed. The students who had arrived at the second obstacle stared in shock. If they want to pass this test, they'll have to get creative. It's the fall? Present Mike shouted. Izuku cheered as Ajitsu jumped onto the rope and started crawling quickly to the other side. Then a pink-haired girl appeared and started laughing. She briefly talked to Mina and Uraraka before arrows went flying. She cackled as her equipment quickly allowed her to pass this obstacle. In the world of heroes, it can be hard to get popular without a flashy quirk. Right, Eraserhead? Present Mike asked while gesturing at Aizawa. I don't know what you're talking about, idiot, Aizawa grumbled. Looks like Todoroki is still skating by easily. Present Mike announced while Todoroki created ice with one foot to slide across the rope. Todoroki glanced back at Kaken, Bakugo while running and Kaken, Bakugo shouted something at him while flying through the air with explosions. Ida watched the aforementioned two fight for a second before he positioned himself on the rope. One leg was facing the left, and the other was facing forward. It allowed him to use his engines to propel him forward, but, boy, does he look foolish, Present Mike teased. Izuku frowned as other people in the audience talked about Todoroki and how it was unsurprising that he performed so well during the first two obstacles. Because his dad is Endeavor, the number 2 hero. As if all his accomplishments weren't that amazing because his father was really strong. As if Todoroki was born strong because his father was strong. Izuku wasn't sure why that bothered him so much. Maybe it's because it implies that children always become like their parents. Because I don't want to be like him. The leader's putting distance between him and the students stuck at the fall. It hasn't been announced how many competitors will make it through to the next round, so there's no time to relax, Present Mike explained to the crowd. Todoroki panted as he reached 2 signs with red, orange, and black. There was a red skull with exclamation marks that read Danger Miles. And now we're finally approaching the last obstacle. Everyone had better tread carefully. You're stepping onto a minefield. If you look carefully, you can see where those little bombs are buried, so keep your eyes on the ground, folks. By the way, those landmines were designed for the games, so they might be loud and flashy, but they're not all that powerful. Just enough to make you wet your pants. Present Mike told the crowd with a wicked look. Get a hold of yourself, Aizawa grumbled. A student stepped on a landmine and flew into the air. Kaken, Bakugo uses his explosions to fly toward Todoroki. Then he set off an explosion a few inches in front of Todoroki. Just like that, a new student takes the lead. The media here is going crazy. There's nothing they love more than an upset. Izuku flinched at the loud cheering and shrunk into Yagi's side again. Hey. The rest of the competitors are catching up, too. And what's this? Can our 2 leaders fight each other and stay in front of the competition? Present Mike asks while Kaken, Bakugo sets off explosions near Todoroki and Todoroki freezes Kaken, Bakugo's arm. Shinso arrived at the minefield and watched as a few bombs were set off. He slowly collected the bombs from the entrance with his scrap of metal and gathered them into a pile. Then he puts the metal in front of himself and jumps at the pile. Thanks for the idea, Bakugu. Shinso thought to himself as he hoped that his plan worked. Todoroki and Kaken, Bakugu both turned to look while all the other students on the minefield fight against the wind created. What's with that huge explosion in the back? That was way more powerful than it should be. Present Mike marveled. What just happened? Class 1 as Shinso Hitoshi is suddenly in hot pursuit of first place. Todoroki and Bakugu are neck and neck for the lead and knocking on the finish line. Present Mike announced as Shinso landed behind them. The audience cheered in response. Look at that plot twist. Those two aren't fighting anymore. That's what having a common enemy will do in this competition. Eraserhead, your students are amazing. What the heck are you teaching them? This has nothing to do with me. Each of them is powered by their own drive to succeed, Aizawa replied sincerely. There you have it. Eraserhead is a terrible teacher, Present Mike cheerily informed the crowd. I'm what? Aizawa demanded angrily. Who would have imagined at the beginning of this race that the climax would be a non-stop megamix of surprises? The first to make it back into the stadium is the first-place winner. Izuku nervously watched Todoroki and Kakenbakugu race to the finish line neck to neck. However, Todoroki won. Everyone cheered as Todoroki took first place, Kakenbakugu took second, and Shinso took third place thanks to the explosions he used as a way to launch himself. Shoto Todoroki is our champion, Present Mike announced while the audience cheered wildly. Once the cheering died down, Deku heard some students discussing Todoroki's stock and looks. Business course students. Some things never change. All Might informed Deku. The contestants are pouring in one after the other. Let's hear some applause for all our competitors as we prepare the results. Uraraka ran up to Shinso and talked to him while they waited for the rest of the students to finish. The first game for the first years is finally over, and what a game it was. Now, let's take a quick look at the standings, shall we? Midnight smiled. Only the top 42 will advance to the next round. But don't be too let down if you didn't make the cut. We've prepared other opportunities for you to shine. Now the real fun is about to begin. The chance to fully move yourselves into the limelight. Give it your best. Midnight encouraged them. Let's see what we have in store for you next. Will your wildest fantasies come to life? What could it be? The waiting is torture. Prepare yourselves for this. Midnight smirked as the event was revealed. Allow me to explain. The participants will form teams of 2 to 4 people as they see fit. In theory, it's basically the same as a regular playground game. But there is one difference. Each player has been assigned a point value based on the results from the obstacle course. Midnight continued to explain, but Deku found his attention drawn towards the audience. Todoroki may have been unfriendly, but his dad gave off an air of anger, even through a screen. He frowned during most of the first obstacle course. Even when Todoroki did something exceptionally impressive during the course. The cavalry task was also a joy to watch. Izuku couldn't help but be excited watching all these quirks in action. Everyone was able to use their quirks in creative ways, and Izuku wanted to observe and learn about them. He continued to add to his notes and the poor notebook was up full by the time the cavalry task ended. Todoroki got the most points and managed to keep them from getting stolen. He used his ice the whole time to defend them. When Bakugu tried to go after him, he was challenged by another group. Shinso managed to collect a lot more points thanks to the help of Uraraka, Tokoyami, and Tenya. Soon after everyone returned, Izuku went to congratulate them. You guys were awesome. I couldn't believe it, Izuku said as everyone came back. Thanks bro. We only just started though, Kirishima said. Still, I've never seen such creative ways for someone to use their quirks, Izuku said. He started to ramble, which some found a little annoying, but good luck telling him to shut up if Uraraka was there. Shinso, you were very amazing. You learned how to use the environment around you to your advantage. It was amazing, Izuku complimented. Whatever, Shinso said dismissively. What's wrong? Uraraka chimed in. You act like what I did was some big special move. I didn't even use my quirk, Shinso explained. Why would that matter? Izuku asked. Shinso scoffed at him. Why would that matter? Everyone wants to see a big flashy quirk and no one would ever want to root for the kid with the villain quirk, Shinso said. That's not true, Uraraka protested while Izuku pressed his lips together tightly, but didn't say anything yet. It is. I've wanted to be a hero for as long as I can remember. Yet everyone told me I should either become a villain or pretend to be quirkless. But I want to be a hero, even with my villainous quirk, Shinso said with determination. This pissed off Izuku, to say the least. Villainous quirk? Izuku repeated sharply. Shinso was taken aback by this, since no one had ever seen Izuku this annoyed before. Izuku moved forward and stared into Shinso's eyes. Shinso, your quirk is truly amazing. If you think your quirk is a villain's quirk, I could argue everyone's quirk is a villain's quirk. Uraraka could crush and kill people as easily as she took down the robots and I could drown people or worse. Shinso, I have met villains before. Trust me when I say you are far from one. A quirk doesn't define what kind of person you are, your actions do, Izuku explained. Both Uraraka and Shinso stood there in shock. This was the first time Izuku mentioned anything about his past. USJ could have been what Izuku was referencing, but they knew better. It was clear Izuku had met real villains before. I mean, they knew this since Izuku was being held in the UA after all, but to actually hear it from him was different. Midoriya Shinso really didn't know what to say. He was literally left speechless. Deku, Uraraka started, but she quickly changed what she was going to say. Deku's right, Shinso? Yeah, he's. After all, you helped save us back at USJ. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how we could have gotten out of there in one piece, Tsu chimed in. Shinso couldn't help but feel touched by this. To have friends tell him he wasn't a villain but a hero really just affected him. Thanks. I really don't know what to say, Shinso sheepishly admitted. Group hug. Uraraka shouted. Tsu, Izuku, and Uraraka tackled the poor guy before he had a chance to escape. However, he wasn't really bothered by it. It was nice to have real friends. It made him want to be a hero even more. So he could save people and make sure people with similar quirks never felt like they had villainous quirks or were less worthy of being a hero than their peers. Izuku had tried talking to Todoroki in the past. After all, he helped when he was having a panic attack. However, Todoroki was difficult to talk to, in the sense that Todoroki seemed to avoid people at all costs. Izuku really wanted to at least be friendly with Todoroki, but it was clear that wasn't going to happen, so he wasn't going to push it. Until now. After Izuku's pep talk with Shinso, he knew the battles were about to begin. Izuku got lost trying to head back to the break room he was in. It was separate from the other students, so he could be away from everyone else. Izuku found himself extremely lost trying to get back. That's when he heard them. What the hell do you want half and half? Kaken Bakugu asked. I wanted to speak to you Bakugu, Todoroki replied. Izuku froze in place. Well, spit it out already. Kaken Bakugu shouted. Have you ever heard of quirk marriage before? Todoroki asked. Izuku listened in horror as Todoroki told his whole life story. What Todoroki said certainly explained why his dad gave off an air of anger and frowned during most of the obstacle course. He was angry that he did so well without using his fire quirk. He felt sorry for him and even related to him in a strange way. Having a father that only cared for their quirks and used them to their advantage. But hearing Todoroki talk about his quirk as if it wasn't his was driving Izuku nuts. Izuku struggled for so long to like his own quirk because it was used to hurt people and was just like his dad's. But it could also help people as it did during the USJ incident. Todoroki's quirk was powerful, and he hadn't even scratched the surface of his quirk yet. There was so much to his quirk, yet he was limiting himself for what? To win one over his father? He wasn't winning. He was letting his father win by allowing him to have control over his quirk. Izuku's blood was boiling the more and more he thought about it. What was truly annoying was that it bothered him so much, yet he wasn't sure why. Izuku had never felt this furious before, and it activated his quirk. It took him a second to realize that he had teleported into the break room. Which was good since he would have been caught if he stayed where he was. So Izuku began to pace around the room while trying to let it go. It wasn't his business. It was literally none of his business, so he really needed to let it go. After all, who is he to stick his nose into Todoroki's business? It was different with Shinso, who was his friend. He wasn't close to Todoroki. He just needed to let it go. Alright Izuku, so let it go. Izuku just knew he was terrified. He was too overwhelmed and he just wanted to leave. Yet all he could do was shake. He felt cold and couldn't stop trembling, but he also felt really sweaty. His vision was starting to blur and his stomach hurt badly. How could he get out of here? Hey, I am going to touch you. Is that okay? Izuku tried to figure out who said that, but he wasn't sure. Maybe he can help. He hesitantly nodded. He suddenly felt extremely cold. He felt a few tears drop from his eyes. No, nope, no, not again. Please not again. Before Izuku's anxiety could get any worse, the temperature changed. The cold was replaced with warmth. He felt his body relax slowly as he took deep breaths. He was becoming aware of his surroundings. Granted, it was taking too long for Izuku's liking. He blinked a few times as the blurriness in his eyes began to clear. As his shaking slowed, his gaze settled on the boy who was helping him. He stared at the boy. He remembered watching his entrance exam. His eyes, well more so his right eye, looked so familiar. Izuku was wondering why he looked so familiar, however, his thoughts were cut off by yelling. "Do you want to go somewhere safe?" the boy asked softly. No, screw that. Izuku stormed out of the room without thinking. The more and more he thought about Todoroki, the more pissed off he became. He didn't know how he found him. Izuku was guessing it was another quirk, but that really wasn't important. Izuku slammed the door open. Todoroki looked up from his water, a little stunned as the door flew open. He lowered the cup of water he was drinking down and placed it on the table. "Midoriya? Can I help you?" he asked cautiously. "You are an idiot," he blurted. Todoroki was taken aback by Izuku's bluntness and anger. "Excuse me?" Todoroki asked without any inflection. "You heard me. You're an idiot. Your logic is flawed and the fact that you're trying to win one over your father is actually failing," Izuku explained sharply. "You heard everything?" Todoroki asked, his tone a mix of worry and confusion. "Yes, but that's not important. What is important is that you are a huge idiot," Izuku repeated even louder. "How am I an idiot?" Todoroki questioned, a little annoyed with Izuku. "It's not my fault you are," Izuku stated. "Really? Care to explain then?" "As a huge idiot, I must need things explained to me," Todoroki challenged. "You think you're winning or proving a point by not using your quirk or training it to its full potential. Because of what? Do you want to prove to your shitty father that you're better than him? Guess what? It won't work if you hold yourself back. All he cares about are quirks and controlling you, right? So as long as you were born with both, he would have been satisfied. He probably just thinks you're rebelling because you're a kid. So all you're proving is that you're petty and you're letting him have control over you. He is winning because you are allowing him to control your quirk," Izuku ranted. Todoroki was listening in stunned silence. He finally gathered his thoughts. "Midoriya understands this. I won't use my father's quirk Todoroki was cut off by Izuku groaning in frustration. "Do you get it? It's your quirk. It's your power, isn't it? It isn't your power because you are letting him control you. Todoroki, your quirk is beautiful, more beautiful than you know. When you fully accept your quirk, you will be more powerful than you ever could have known, and if you want to be better than your father, then be a better person, be kind to people, and live a good life. One day he'll realize he's alone and you're powerful, happy, and loved," Izuku said angrily. Todoroki looked away and noticed that the water in his cup was shaking. It must be because Midoriya is so worked up, Todoroki thought to himself. Todoroki stared at Izuku, processing his words and trying to gather his thoughts. He felt Izuku grab his hands, and he returned his attention to him once again. "You helped me out on my first day here. I just wanted to return the favor because I know you will be kinder, better, and stronger than your father," Izuku confessed. Todoroki never thought he would ever be this speechless, yet here he was, too stunned to say anything. Izuku pulled his hands away as he started to realize what he had just done. He turned bright red and stepped back. Then he teleported out of the room as Todoroki reached for his wrist. Todoroki had reached out to stop Izuku, but it was too late. He was gone. Where did you disappear to, Deku? Shinso asked as Izuku appeared in the hallway leading to the room Todoroki was in. The one where he yelled at Todoroki and then disappeared. Deku felt himself turn red again. When Deku failed to answer, he took a guess. Did you get lost? Deku nodded as Shinso began walking. Deku hurried after him. He still felt a little awkward. Because of Todoroki. We have to hurry if we want to make it back in time for the next match. We were all looking for you. One of the teachers noticed that you disappeared, so we were all worried. Especially after earlier, Shinso explained while looking away. Sorry, I'll try not to get lost again, Izuku apologized. Shinso nodded in acknowledgement before saying, thank you for earlier. What you said meant so much to me. I'm not sure if you want to talk about what happened before, but if you ever do, I'll listen. To as little or as much as you'd like to share, Shinso assured him while avoiding his gaze. Shinso, thank you. Izuku smiled at him and was surprised when Shinso ruffled his hair. He smiled wider at the affection until they stopped at the room. Thank you, I'll cheer for you from Izuku was cut off by an angry voice. Izuku Midoriya, where have you been? A very annoyed and worried tone asked. Aizawa, I thought you were doing the broadcast with Yamada? Izuku nervously defended himself. Midoriya? Aizawa repeated. Shinso slipped away while Deku tried to defend himself. Izuku was still lectured about safety all the way through the first few matches. Deku zoned out and wondered if he was droning on so that he wouldn't have to return to Yamada and the broadcast yet. Todoroki stood there in the room processing everything that had just happened. Midoriya just stormed into the room, called him out, yelled at him, and then left. With no idea what else to say, he was left standing there like an idiot. After processing everything Midoriya had said to him, he couldn't help but be angry with him. Who is he to tell me off like that? We don't talk, we're not friends. What gives him the right to storm in, yell at me, and not have the decency to face my backlash? Shudo's blood was boiling, but he tried to distract himself from his frustration. He needed to calm down. He was about to fight in a match and he couldn't be worked up. Todoroki inhaled angrily as he waited for the match to start. Earlier, he tried to calm himself down by taking deep breaths. But he couldn't freeze his emotions like he usually did. So he ended up freezing half the stadium. He was trying to keep his emotions in check and he was failing miserably. During the rest of the matches, Todoroki finally managed to smother Midoriya's echoing words. It took a while, but eventually, he was able to squash those thoughts and put them in a little box to examine later. But then he stepped into the arena for his next match and saw Shinso, who was always hanging out with Midoriya. His little box burst open and momentarily distracted him. You think you're winning or proving a point by not using your quirk dash? Which was all the opening Shinso needed. He captured Todoroki with his equipment and pulled him closer. Todoroki quickly froze the scarf and all of Shinso's body. Then he struggled to escape the scarf. He huffed in annoyance and used his quirk to send Shinso over the line a little, not enough to bring Todoroki over the line with him, but enough to end the match. He waited for them to thaw out Shinso with a murderous glare. Once the scarf was off him, he stormed away. Shoto was even angrier now than he was earlier. He didn't have time to think about Midoriya or his many friends. He needed to focus on winning so his father would finally see how much better his mother's quirk was compared to his. Todoroki stiffened as he noticed Endeavor. He stopped and asked, "What do you want?" Endeavor answered with a glare. "You're acting disgracefully, Shoto," Endeavor informed him. Shoto walked toward him as he continued, "If you had simply used the power in your left side you would have had an overwhelming victory in both of the first rounds. It's time to stop this childish rebellion of yours. You have a duty to surpass that imbecile All Might." During his rant, Shoto looked straight ahead and continued to walk toward his previous destination. Once Shoto passed him, he sneered. Endeavor's frown deepened as he asked, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Shoto clenched his fists tighter but remained silent. "You're different from your siblings. You're my greatest masterpiece," Endeavor added. "Is that all you have to say to me, you bastard?" Shoto asked heatedly. In response to Endeavor's impassive glare, he added, "I'll win this match and advance using only Mom's quirk." I won't give you the pleasure of seeing me use yours. Endeavor sighed and replied, even if that works for you in this tournament, you'll soon find the limits of that power. Shoto stayed silent until Endeavor finally walked away. Once he was gone, Shoto hurried away with a clenched jaw and slit eyes. If he happened to kick a few walls while he continued on his way, no one noticed. Whether it was Shinsu's face or his encounter with Endeavor that caused it, Todoroki was unable to get Midoriya's echoing voice out of his head. His words begged for attention. Their volume never changed. They just continued on a loop until Todoroki was forced to at least acknowledge them if he didn't want to look crazy. Not that it worked in Bakugo's opinion. You are an idiot. Todoroki clenched his hands tight as Midoriya's lecture began to play once more. He knows nothing. He doesn't know anything about him. So why? Why did he say that to me? Maybe he does have a point. Bakugo and Todoroki both observed the flames waving through the air as they stepped out. I'll get him to use both quirks on me by the end of the match, and then I'll be the undisputed champion. Bakugo grinned as the match started. I'll defeat him with only my mom's quirk and then continue to aim for the top without ever using my father's quirk. Todoroki told himself, though he didn't feel too confident about his words. Todoroki quickly hit the ground and created a large hunk of ice. Almost instantly Bakugo moved his arms and created explosions fast enough to fend off the ice. What the hell is this? Still holding back half and half? Bakugo shouted, but Todoroki ignored him. After struggling to ignore Midoriya's voice all day, it was easy for Todoroki to ignore Bakugo's. You heard me. You're an idiot. Your logic is flawed and the fact that you're trying to win one over your father is actually failing. Focus, prove him wrong. Todoroki thought to himself as he continued his assault. Bakugo became overwhelmed and was encapsulated in ice. You bastard! You think using only one of your quirks is enough against me? How dare you! Bakugo angrily cursed Todoroki as he created more explosions. Each hit the ice with a thud. He kept hearing Midoriya's words. He was overanalyzing almost every single word and detail. He didn't want to understand why he said that. He needed to. Was he right? No, he can't be. What could he know? He's never seen his mother's face of terror before pain engulfed his face. He's never been pushed past his limits while being yelled at for being a disappointment at the age of 6. After 10 of the thuds, the ice cracked deeply. After 2 more, it abruptly went flying and Todoroki was pushed back a few inches. He stared in shock before trying to protect his face from the bright orange light that quickly bathed the arena. Bakugo was bathed in red due to the explosion and his legs were firmly planted on the ground. His arms were held in a victorious pose as ice chunks flew at Todoroki. He was thrown back. Bakugo firmly set his hands on the ice and said, "The stronger the quirk, the more imprecise the attacks." While Bakugo spoke, Todoroki ran at him and Bakugo responded by flying at him. Gray smoke covered the hole he just escaped from as he blasted out of it. Todoroki thrust his hand out at him and Bakugo shot an explosion. They canceled each other out and Bakugo scowled angrily. "Come on. Don't hold back now." Bakugo seethed. Bakugo launched himself at Todoroki and quickly latched onto his shoulder and the left side of his head. "Are you underestimating me? Idiot!" Bakugo yelled as he stomped the ground. Then he threw him and he flew through the air. Midair Todoroki created ice to save himself from falling out of bounds. He managed to fall feet first and land on top of the ice he already created. He started to create a circle around Bakugo. This is starting to get old half and half. "Come on, you coward. Fight me." When Todoroki just continued his circle around Bakugo, Bakugo felt his anger rise. What's wrong? Still gotta prove a point to your fucking dad? Bakugo teased him in the hopes that he'd become angry enough to use his quirk. Do you want to prove to your shitty father that you're better than him? Guess what? It won't work if you hold yourself back. All he cares about are quirks and controlling you, right? So as long as you were born with both, he would have been satisfied. He probably just thinks you're rebelling because you're a kid. Todoroki suppressed a shiver. I know I'm reaching the limit of my quirk. If I overdo it, I'll freeze and lose the match. But I can't let him win. So all you're proving is that you're petty and you're letting him have control over you. He is winning because you are allowing him to control your quirk? Todoroki sighed and bit his cheek in annoyance. Bakugo threw himself at him and created an explosion. Then Todoroki grabbed his arm and tossed Bakugo. Bakugo landed on one knee with one foot. He used one arm to disrupt the momentum of his fall. Todoroki quickly moved in front of the hole where Bakugo emerged from. "Stop screwing around," Bakugo ordered, as his face tightened in anger. He grinned unsettlingly and put a hand in front of him. "Am I not strong enough to make you use it?" A small explosion flickered in his palm as Todoroki glared and breathed heavily. The ice on Todoroki's face shone, and it annoyed the hell out of Bakugo. A display of his immaturity. His stupid grudge. Everyone fought hard against their opponents. Even Round Face came up with a decent idea. Maybe if she fought someone else, she would have even won. Yet Todoroki thought it was fine to hold back and mock everyone who worked so hard to get here. Bakugo created more small explosions as he glared at Todoroki. "Bastard! I'll show you what'll happen if you make a fool of me. I'll kill you." Bakugo punctuated the end of his sentence with a large explosion. Todoroki moved a little in response to Bakugo's words. "I want an indisputable first place. I can't get that even if I beat scum that underestimates me. If you have no intention of winning, then don't stand in front of me." Bakugo screamed while vibrating. He begins to run at the infuriating boy. "Why are you standing here, damn it? But you want to be a hero, right? That's fine. You're not bound by his blood. Decide who you want to become. And be all you can be." Todoroki froze as her voice drifted through his thoughts. He hadn't let himself think about her in years, yet her voice sounded like she was right next to him. "Would she want me to use my father's quirk? Do you get it? She did say to be all you can be. If Midoriya was right, it's your quirk. Decide who you want to become." Todoroki hesitated. "Would she really want me to?" Bakugo fired an explosion near Todoroki, who barely managed to dodge it because he was distracted by his thoughts, but all of his father's training helped him. "It's your power, isn't it?" Todoroki might be mad at Midoriya, but he was right. "My quirk isn't Hellflame or Blizzard. It's half cold, half hot. My mother would be proud of me. I can feel it. She always encouraged me to be better than him. So I'll make sure I am. Thank you, Midoriya." Suddenly, the ice melted off Todoroki as his left side burst into flames. Todoroki wipes some sweat off his face as he grins. "That's it. That's it," Bakugo exclaimed as he threw a huge explosion. Then he threw a few more excitedly as he neared his target. "If you're going to stand in front of me, then you should just concentrate on winning," Bakugo announced as he created a smoky tornado. Todoroki threw out a flame-covered hand and Bakugo smirked confidently. "Howitzer impact, a technique similar to a missile, a perfect way to end my match with this bastard. He's lucky to even witness it after how he looked down at me." The arena was once more a blazing orange with shades of gray smoke, then it was engulfed by a darker orange. Ice was destroyed by the blast and the crowd's hair moved with the heated air. Not even a few small shards of ice remained. Todoroki and Bakugo both were thrown back a few feet by the collision, but they managed to stay on their feet. Bakugo cursed mentally as his legs shook. Todoroki breathed heavily, but he seemed less exhausted. "I don't think that was enough to beat me. I'm just getting started," he shouted shakily as he began to run toward him. For the rest of the fight, Todoroki went all out. He didn't hold back, and neither did Bakugo. The fight, however, was getting intense. With fire being thrown left and right, the seats nearest to the fight watched nervously. So Cementos and Kayama put a stop to the battle. The gas affected Todoroki first. He flew out of the arena as Bakugo finished launching an attack at him. Therefore, Bakugo won the round. Though he didn't appreciate that as he fell to the ground. "Damn it, I was so close. There's no point getting first place." By the end of Aizawa's lecture, Izuku had heard the same thing in 1,000 different ways. Aizawa was definitely repeating himself so that he didn't have to return to Yamada and the broadcast yet. Aizawa left with deliberately slow steps, but right as Izuku opened his mouth to comment on that, Aizawa sent him a dark glare. Izuku pouted and settled down to watch the rest of the match currently being shown. But he had no idea what was happening, so when it finished Yagi caught him up and he quickly scribbled notes into his book. Midoriya watched nervously as Todoroki entered the stadium. He looked determined and slightly conflicted. Then the match started and Midoriya opened his notebook, just in case Todoroki chose to use his flames. I know Todoroki is worried about being like his dad. But it's his quirk, and the warmth I felt that day, as well as the kindness, is nothing like that man. Izuku thought to himself angrily. Midoriya slumped as Todoroki used his ice once more. Kakenbakugu defended against his attacks skillfully for a while, but he was quickly encased in ice. Todoroki looked more and more conflicted as time went on. Then Kakenbakugu fought his way out of the ice with loud thuds. The first few had Deku shying away as he was scared by sudden, loud noises, but Yagi wrapped a comforting arm around him and smiled at him. Deku smiled back before returning his attention to the screen. In a matter of seconds, the ice cracked and pushed Todoroki back a few feet. Deku stared wide-eyed at the bright orange light covering the arena. Would it hurt my eyes if I were sitting in the stadium? Deku wondered. Kakenbakugu emerged bathed in red light. He looks kind of scary, Yagi whispered to Deku as if he was worried that he might hear. Deku nodded and shivered. Ice chunks flew at Todoroki and he flew back even more. Todoroki ran at Kakenbakugu and Kakenbakugu began to fly toward him. I really need to remember his name is Bakugu, constantly correcting myself is annoying. Todoroki and Bakugu both sent attacks at each other that ended up canceling each other out. Then Deku gasped as Bakugu threw himself at Todoroki. Then Bakugu tossed him. Whoa! Deku exclaimed as Todoroki managed to fall feet first and use his quirk to avoid falling out of bounds. Todoroki circled Bakugu and Bakugu's face grew scarier and scarier. He appeared to be screaming things at his opponent. For what? To get him angry enough to use his quirk? Why would he care? Deku frowned as he noticed how white Todoroki was becoming. Can he really carry on without being affected by the ice covering his body? He almost looks like he has frostbite. Bakugu threw himself at Todoroki and created an explosion. Then Todoroki grabbed his arm and tossed Bakugu. Bakugu landed harshly and used his arm to disrupt the momentum of his fall. Todoroki quickly moved in front of the hole where Bakugu emerged from. Bakugu's face tightened in anger. He grinned unsettlingly and put a hand in front of him. A small explosion flickered in his palm as Todoroki glared and breathed heavily. The ice on Todoroki's face shone and contrasted strangely with the red of his nose. Todoroki's nose was turning an unusual shade of red. Oh, that idiot really might have given himself frostbite. Recovery Girl is going to be so angry either way. Bakugu created more small explosions as he glared at Todoroki. Bakugu suddenly created a large explosion. After a few moments, Bakugu started to vibrate. Then he ran at the freezing boy. Midoriya noticed Todoroki stiffening a bit as Bakugu got close to him. Is the cold finally getting to him? Or is something else bothering him? Todoroki was slower at reacting to Bakugu's attacks than usual. He seems to be really distracted, but by what? Deku watched with wide eyes as the ice melted off Todoroki. He's never done that before. He even let Shinso and Shiro remain frozen because he didn't want to use his quirk. Deku froze when he noticed Todoroki's skin lit up with fire. Then he started cheering so loudly that he startled Yagi. He didn't care if Todoroki won, he was just happy to see Todoroki embracing his power. Embracing himself. It was truly beautiful to see. His flames were bright, beautiful and graceful, just like Todoroki himself. Izuku was mesmerized by them. Maybe later I can rewatch this match and sketch out his flames, just for informational purposes, of course. Midoriya thought excitedly to himself. Todoroki wiped some sweat off his face as he grinned. Kakenbakugu threw a huge explosion. Then he threw a few more as he neared Todoroki. Deku pulled his pen out as Bakugu began to create a smoky tornado. Todoroki sent flames toward a grinning Bakugu. Watching the fight was beautiful. Something that Izuku didn't realize until now. Quirks were beautiful and the way their flames flew through the air and mixed together was breathtaking. For the rest of the fight, Todoroki went all out. The arena was once more a blazing orange with shades of gray smoke, Then it was engulfed by a darker orange. Ice was destroyed by the blast. Not even a small shard of ice remained. Todoroki and Bakugo both were thrown back a few feet by the collision, but they managed to stay on their feet. "Go, Todoroki, you can do it!" Izuku exclaimed as Todoroki sent more flames toward Bakugo. His eyes were lit up and he seemed ready to continue, though he looked a bit winded. Todoroki and Bakugo traded blows that steadily grew in intensity. I wonder how amazing it would be to sit closer to the fight and feel the heat. Izuku hoped that if he was still here next year, he'd get to sit closer to the fight and cheer them all on. Hopefully, they'll be able to hear me then. Izuku jumped to his feet as Todoroki suddenly stilled and started to fall forwards. "Are villains attacking?" Izuku worried for a moment before he noticed the pink smoke. He sighed as he realized it must be Kiyama. Bakugo must not have noticed the smoke either, as he sent a strong attack toward his knocked-out opponent. Obviously, Todoroki went flying, and soon after Bakugo succumbed to sleep. Why does he look so angry? Izuku wondered as Bakugo's eyes slipped shut. Bakugo was indeed furious with his win. His heated screaming and the explosions at anyone who got close to him confirmed it. After one of his explosions almost hit the crowd, Yue had him chained up. Once Yagi finished giving the medals out, Izuku went to reunite with his friends. As he made his way over to them, the realization of what he did and said to Todoroki started to kick in. "You are an idiot? Oh my god, why did I think it was a good idea to say that? So all you're proving is that you're petty and you're letting him have control over you. I really could have phrased that better. I sounded like such a jerk. Maybe I am a jerk? I didn't even think about what I said until after he used his flames. Maybe I'm a huge jerk." Midoriya thought guiltily to himself. I guess Aizawa doesn't go easy on his favorites, either. Shinso teased as he moved over so Midoriya could sit in between him and Uraraka. "I couldn't be his favorite because I'm not a student. But if I was, you'd still be the favorite, Mini Aizawa," Deku teased him back. Shinso just shrugged with a small smile before changing the subject. "I still can't believe how far I made it. I fought against Todoroki. I didn't win, but that's farther than I thought I'd get. He was pretty cold during the whole." "Well, he's always stoic, but he looked extra cold today," Shinso added when they shot him questioning looks. "You did really well, Shinso." Uraraka praised him while the others nodded in agreement. "So did you, Uraraka. You fought against him and I thought for sure you'd win with your impressive strategy. Though I was really worried about you in the end. Are you okay?" Deku asked. "Recovery Girl really helped, so I only feel a little sore right now. I'm just happy to have lost in a fair fight," Uraraka smiled. She was also pleased to be complimented on her strategy. She'd spent a lot of time coming up with it. "At least you all had serious fights. I can't believe Hatsum spent our entire fight showing off her gadgets," Ida complained. "You should just be happy you won. She could have suddenly used one of her gadgets to force you out of bounds. Midway through, I'm sure you let your guard down. It could have ended even more embarrassingly for you," Shinso pointed out with a small smirk. Ida grumbled under his breath, "That's true. I did let my guard down. I'm lucky she didn't capitalize on that." "I suppose you're right," Ida agreed reluctantly. Izuku's thoughts wandered back to his conversation with Todoroki. "I really should have stayed quiet, or at least been kinder when I said something. I didn't even consider how traumatizing it must be to have a family like that." Deku thought to himself. "Is everything all right, Midoriya?" Ida asked when Deku's face became really scrunched up. I was thinking of a conversation I had earlier. I'm pretty sure I was a huge jerk throughout the whole conversation," Izuku confessed. "Well, who were you talking to?" Ida asked. Izuku explained his conversation with Todoroki, though he made sure to leave out Todoroki's personal life. He explained how he basically screamed at Todoroki. "Well, it sounds like you might have overstepped, but I think your words might have actually helped him," Tenya said honestly. "You really think so?" Izuku asked. "Did you see him fight?" Uraraka asked pointedly. "Yeah, but Izuku cut himself out when Shinso began to talk. "I agree with Ida. You did overstep, however, I think it helped. Sometimes you need to be yelled at to understand another person's point of view." Uraraka nodded in agreement and Izuku felt a little better. Oh, I also wanted to invite anyone who wasn't busy to come over and have tacos with us. I know most of you will probably be out celebrating with your families, but I still wanted to ask, Deku added after a few moments of silence. Everyone but Shinso declined his invitation, but he didn't mind. He and Shinso rarely got to spend time together one-on-one, so dinner would be interesting. Unless he just abandons me for our cats after the meal. Deku thought to himself with a smile. Tsu abruptly pulled him out of his thoughts by tapping on his shoulder. Izuku turned in response and Tsu pointed at Todoroki standing there. He jumped in surprise to see him. Midoriya, can I speak to you? Todoroki asked. Everyone turned to Izuku, and he nodded in response, slightly embarrassed by his reaction. We'll see you later, Deku, Uraraka said as everyone left. Izuku swallowed nervously and turned to face Todoroki with his stoic expression. I'm sorry for what I said and how I behaved. I had no right to say all that stuff, you and I dash. Before Izuku could finish, Todoroki spoke. I'm not mad at you. I actually wanted to thank you. Izuku stood there, a little stunned. You were right. I was letting my hatred for my father prevent me from reaching my full potential. So thank you, Todoroki said. There was a long moment of silence and Izuku could sense that Todoroki wanted to say something else. He just had no idea what to say to that. I thought he'd hate me. They stared at each other until Deku realized he probably should say something to Todoroki. You're welcome? Izuku asked, but he wasn't sure if that was the right thing to say. He just wanted to leave, since it was getting too awkward for him. After a long minute of quiet, Midoriya started to turn away. Todoroki smacked his forehead and grabbed Deku's wrist. Sorry, I'm not good at this, Todoroki confessed. I want to be friends with you. And your friends, Todoroki explained nervously. Izuku smiled at Todoroki. I'm not good at making friends either, Izuku replied before looking down at his wrist. Todoroki awkwardly let go of Izuku's wrist when he realized he was still holding it. I would love for us to be friends, Izuku finished and Todoroki couldn't help but smile. They stared at one another for another long moment before Midoriya blinked. He has a beautiful smile. Are you alright after using your quirk? I know it must have been really hard for you, Midoriya asked earnestly. It was hard for me but I feel a little better now that I've accepted that it's a part of me and not him, Todoroki explained with another smile. Deku blushed at the smile aimed at him. Deku rubbed the back of his neck and then flashed Todoroki a bright smile of his own. I'm glad you were amazing against Bakugo. Thank you. Are you okay? You look very red, Todoroki pointed out. I'm just really happy that we're friends, Deku replied honestly. When I started smiling, they all kept complimenting me. So it should be okay to say the same to Todoroki, right? You have a beautiful smile. Todoroki's shirt caught fire for a second before he hastily put it out. What happened? Are you all right? Deku asked anxiously. I'm fine. I just haven't been training my fire quirk, so it's less controlled than my ice quirk. You, also have a lovely smile, Todoroki added the last part quietly. Midoriya squeaked in surprise, and Todoroki sent him a questioning look. Deku tried to cover it by coughing afterward, but that didn't really help. So he quickly changed the subject. Would you like to hang out with us, me and Shinso? We're having tacos, Yamada's idea. The others are going home to celebrate with their families. You should come, Deku said and his eyes shone with excitement. I don't think my old man would like that, Izuku deflated at once with Todoroki's response. Well, I did use my fire quirk as he wanted. And I'm not sure when I'll have another chance to sneak away and hang out with Midoriya. But I don't really care. Let's go before he sees me, Todoroki relented and Midoriya excitedly led him away. Shinso quirked an eyebrow at Todoroki joining them, but said nothing. They mostly talked about the sports festival, and Deku introduced Todoroki to all the cats. While Deku was setting the table for dinner, Todoroki turned on his phone. He smirked at all the notifications. Then he typed, Yamada and Aizawa's secret love child invited me to dinner. I'll be home in an hour or two. Then he smirked and turned his phone back off as the phone notified him that his father was calling. Midoriya and Yamada did most of the talking during dinner, which ended up with them getting a little messy. Some of the tacos fell apart mid-sentence on them. But what else could you expect when they gestured with their food? Todoroki laughed as Midoriya tried to subtly clean sour cream off his shirt. Tenya was proud of his family and friends. He aspired to be a hero, just like his brother. He knew he was blessed with how fortunate he was. Tenya never took it for granted. He couldn't be any happier with his life. Then it all changed. All after one phone call. After leaving Midoriya to have his conversation with Todoroki, he got a call. He excused himself from Uraraka, Shinso, and Tsu to answer the phone call. It was his mother, and she told him that his brother was attacked. He was soon allowed to leave UA to be by his brother's side. It was agonizing to wait for updates on his brother's health. Soon they learned that his brother would live, but he would be paralyzed, meaning he would be forced into retirement. Tenya had never felt more rage in his life. It was an injustice. It was all because of one person. One person did this to his brother. The hero killer. Ida tried to convince himself that going through with his plan would be foolish. Logically, he knew it was. But every time he decided to leave the hero killer to the pros, he saw his brother lying in the hospital bed. My brother is an incredible person, a caring person who saved many lives, someone people looked up to, and he's my hero. There's something I wanted to ask you, big brother, what drives you? Why did you choose to become a pro hero in the first place? Tensei glanced away and let out a thoughtful, well, our grandfather and parents were all heroes, so everyone kind of expected I would be one too. Staying in the family business and all that. Plus, it made sense to me. I think the coolest people in the world are those who did things for others. I wanted to be the kind of guy who helps people in trouble. Then why not work as a police officer or something? Aren't you listening to me? Think of what I'm saying. Tensei smiled softly as he ruffled his hair. Ida could still feel his hand ruffling his hair. He touched his head and frowned as it made contact only with air. You take things at face value a little too much and you're a hard worker. And definitely smarter and more athletic than me back when I was a kid. Wait a second, that's my secret, Tensei began as he flashed a smile toward his brother. Knowing you look up to me makes me better. I have to be sure I make you proud, Tensei finished with a laugh. Tenya shook as sobs racked his frame. Tenya knew logically that he shouldn't go after him, but he needed to. For Tensei and himself. Tenya read through the latest news on the hero killer before fitfully falling asleep. Deku was happy. Today was one of the few days when all his friends could hang out with him after school. Todoroki usually had to go home right away for training, but Endeavor told Todoroki this morning that he had to stay late to finish some paperwork. So Todoroki could hang out with them without incurring Endeavor's wrath. Todoroki entered the room last, and he shyly looked around for Deku. Deku had texted him that the door was left unlocked so he could let himself in, but he still felt awkward doing so. He made a beeline for a spot on the sofa between Deku and Shinso. Deku turned to him in surprise and offered him a bright smile. Todoroki's eyes brightened as he gave a small half-smile. I'm so excited to do my internship with the pro hero gunhead. Why are you doing your internship with him? Isn't your quirk more suited to support work? Shinso asked. Yes, but I want to become stronger. All of our classmates are amazing and I don't want to fall further behind you all. I think learning some offensive moves will really help me with that, Uraraka admitted with a determined grin. I think so too. Maybe you'll learn a super secret martial arts technique and use it to beat Bakugan next year, Shinso added thoughtfully. I'm not so sure about that, but that would be pretty cool, Uraraka replied doubtfully. Are you excited about your work study with Eraserhead? Sue questioned. I am. He is my favorite hero after all. And I could use some help with my capturing weapon. I still can't wield it as smoothly as he does, Shinso complained. Of course, he's looking forward to his internship. He is Eraserhead's favorite, Uraraka answered matter-of-factly. Guys, I'm not his fave dash. You are, Tsu disagreed. I'm not. Deku, am I his favorite? Shinso asked Deku with pleading eyes. Deku knew what Shinso wanted but felt like joining in on the teasing. Of course, you're his favorite, Deku replied and laughed hard as Shinso's face fell. Uraraka and Tsu quickly joined him. Even Shinso laughed a bit. The other two stayed quiet. Deku knew Todoroki was naturally quiet, But usually, Ida would tell them to stop teasing Shinso. Instead, Ida sat there with a lost and dark expression. The other two continued talking while Deku stared at Ida. Ida had told them what happened to his brother. Not that he had to. It was all over the news. Along with the hero killer's other victims. After he finished telling them about his forced retirement, he excused himself. They tried to call after him, but he sped away. Deku wondered how he felt. Deku had lost family before. His father, mother, and uncle. But it wasn't the same. His father was horrible. He wasn't sure what happened to his mother but knew she must have died long ago, and his uncle was still here in a sense. He'd never had to deal with worrying over his loved one's fate as they struggled to survive. Or accept that they'll have to give up on their dreams because someone else irreversibly ruined their lives. How was one supposed to feel about all of that? Todoroki lightly nudged him out of his reverie and quietly repeated the question Tsu asked him. Everyone in 1A was excited about their internships. Izuku may have felt excited on his friend's behalf, but he was worried about Ida. He had been acting differently ever since the sports festival. He didn't just notice it, he could feel it. He noticed he could feel a lot of things now. He could feel everyone's emotions. It was weird and a little uncomfortable. Whenever his friends were feeling any strong emotions, he could feel them. He felt Uraraka's happiness when she was complimented on her performance at the sports festival. He felt Todoroki's discomfort when they talked about him interning with his father, and he sent him a soft smile to try to comfort him. He felt Shinso's exhaustion as he struggled not to fall asleep in class. He tried to convince Shinso to head home and sleep, but he stubbornly insisted he'd gone longer without sleep. So midway through the movie they were watching, he fell asleep slumped weirdly on the sofa. Deku adjusted him so he'd be more comfortable before throwing a blanket over him and changing the movie. During class, Ida's emotions were always the strongest. He could feel others, Aizawa's annoyance and Bakugu's simmering anger mixed with confusion. But Ida's were almost suffocating. The first time he felt them, he tripped and smacked his head into Aizawa's desk. Aizawa quickly bent down to help him up and insisted he visit Recovery Girl. Izuku resisted and promised that he felt fine. The next second he and all of 1A were on their way to Recovery Girl's room because, if you don't want to head over there yourself, then we'll all go. That way, we'll be sure you make it there safely. Shinso tried to save him by offering to escort him himself, but Aizawa was unrelenting. Ida's anger wasn't just anger, it was a deep sadness, burning hate, and a strange sense of urgency. It worried Izuku what such a combination could mean for his friend. He tried talking to Ida about it, but he avoided it whenever he brought it up. He truly wanted to help him, but Ida wanted to bottle it up inside. A part of Izuku wanted to reveal that he felt what he felt, but another part of him wasn't sure that would help. Izuku was conflicted, so he ran to the big three for help. Izuku knew he could turn to Yamada and Aizawa whenever he needed help. They helped him out a lot, however, when it came to struggling to fit in with his self-esteem and self-image. That being said, they couldn't help out when it came to his problems with his friends. It's not that they couldn't help him, it's just that it was awkward to ask for help from them. They could be a bit too overprotective of him and sometimes a bit defensive. This was due to how his first day went. Even now, Aizawa said that he wasn't upset with his class, which was true. He was just more defensive of Izuku. Yamada was the same, if not worse. He was very protective of Izuku and tended to come up with the worst-case scenario. Even yesterday, they overreacted. Ashido and he had just finished watching Titanic, so he was crying his eyes out while she sat there patiently. Aizawa walked in to see what the noise was about and quickly used his capturing weapon to restrain Ashido and moved in front of Deku. "Are you alright? Do I need to take you to Recovery Girl?" "And you just what do dash?" And then Yamada walked in to investigate why his grumpy husband was suddenly screaming. One glance at Deku's tear-stained face was all it took to get him going. Ashido stared at them, unimpressed, while Deku quieted his sobs so he could explain. "Ashido didn't do anything to me. We just finished the Titanic, and I knew what to expect, but I didn't think Jack would actually dash." Izuku cut himself off with a sob. Yamada blinked and grabbed the remote. Once the TV turned on, it confirmed that they had been watching Titanic. Aizawa dropped her onto the couch and wordlessly left. Deku could feel his conflicting emotions. He was still a little anxious, But he also felt relieved and a bit embarrassed. Yamada had turned red and profusely apologized to them both. Ashido brushed it off but assured Deku that she would tease them about it another day. Izuku could feel that she was a bit uneasy, but mostly happy. He was surprised but glad that she wouldn't stop being his friend over it. And he'd work hard to stop this from happening again. So the big three were his next best option. They helped him out a lot. Plus, they weren't so protective of him. It was honestly refreshing. Izuku went out to search for them. After looking for a while, he decided to call them, which was always a challenge for him. Ashido was helping him, but he was still learning. It was extremely simple for most people, but difficult for him since he didn't have a phone. Deku's eye twitched in annoyance and he breathed in deeply. He reread the slip in his hand before dialing Tagada's number into the phone. Well, he failed the first try but got it the second time. Hello. Tagada answered cheerfully. Hey Tagada, Izuku started, but Tagada cut him off. We'll be there in 5. See you soon. Tagada answered seriously before hanging up. Izuku stood there in stunned silence before the big three showed up at his doorstep. Hey, how did you know? Izuku asked as Hadu slowly moved to hug him. You never call unless it's an emergency, Hadu pointed out. What's wrong? Is everything alright? Tagada asked worriedly. I need advice. I'm not sure how to help my friend, Izuku replied. Izuku started to explain his problem and why he wanted to help Ida. They listened to him and thought about how to help him. Well, his brother's attack must be really hard for him to accept. It's really sweet of you, Aizu, to want to help him. He needs it since he's going through a rough time right now, Hadu said. However, he might want space to deal with everything, Amajiki countered. Izuku carefully considered both points and struggled to find a middle ground. Have you offered to listen to him? Tagada asked. Yes, I have. Every time I do, he ignores me and I don't know what else to try. Izuku cried. Did you let him know that you're willing to listen whenever he's ready? Tagada asked. Izuku paused as he thought about every time he tried to talk to Ida. He only ever considered talking to Ida on the spot. He really didn't offer any alternatives. Sometimes Midoriya, people want options so they can think things through. Especially something like this. Ida might not be ready to talk to you now, but let him know you will be there for him when he is ready, Tagada explained gently. Izuku thought about it and decided that he was right. Wise words from Tagada. Hadu cheered. Those were really thoughtful words, Mirio, Amajiki said as he grabbed his hand. Thank you so much. For everything, Izuku said gratefully. I'm so lucky to have them in my life. Anything. How about we make cookies? Hadu offered. Only if they have chocolate chips, Izuku agreed as the two rushed to the kitchen. Tagada and Amajiki stayed behind. Tagada and Amajiki joined them as they set the dough on the freshly sprayed pan. And why exactly would I agree to this? Aizawa asked sarcastically while glaring at his students. Because you love us? Ashido jokingly replied. Kaminari snorted and added, because you'll miss us the week we're gone. And so will Deku, Ashido added with a grin. Aizawa sighed and after 20 minutes of listening to them plead their case, he relented. Fine, you two and a few of your friends may come over, but it will be a small affair. No alcohol, I'll be in the dorms so don't even think about it, I'll know, Aizawa finished with a bone-chilling glare. Kaminari shivered, but Ashido just grinned and dragged Kaminari away. Thank you. I'm sure Deku will be overjoyed to spend time with some of his friends before we all leave. Ashido shouted over her shoulder. Aizawa groaned as he turned to enter the dorm. I hope he does. I wish he didn't have to stay here while we both leave him alone, but it's safer for him. We should make his favorite dinner and spend time with him before his friends show up. And then Shinso smiled in response and walked away. Smiled, Izuku emphasized as he complained between bites. As interesting as it is that your friends are acting secretive, please swallow before opening your mouth, Aizawa groaned as he wiped his cheek. Sorry, Izuku began before Aizawa's pointed stare convinced him to shut his mouth. He finished chewing and swallowed before apologizing once more. Shoyuda, don't be so hard on him, Hizashi chided. Don't even get me started on you. On our first date, you had the audacity to dash. But we don't need to bring that up. I'm sorry, Izuku, Don't talk with food in your mouth from now on. Hisashi quickly cut Shoyuta off. Aizawa shot him a smug look as Izuku wondered what had happened. Maybe he could ask Aizawa in private later? After they finished eating, Hisashi eagerly volunteered to do the dishes and handed Shoyuta one of his jelly punches. It's still so surreal to see him smile. I'm glad he's happier, Aizawa thought to himself. Out loud, he said, "Wanna watch a movie before it's time for bed?" Of course. Do we have any popcorn left? What movie? Have you seen it before or dash? Aizawa interrupted him with a cough. Let's pick a movie while we wait for him to finish the dishes. Did you know he's severely frightened of ghosts, even Casper? Aizawa grinned. Who? Izuku asked blankly. I guess we're watching The Friendly Ghost. Are you really scared of Casper? Izuku asked with a frown as the cartoon ended. If you read the comics, you'd understand, Hisashi argued. I have them if you want to check them out. WHYI, you're going to summon an actual ghost with all of your ghosty apparel. Yamada cried. Aizawa just raised an eyebrow at him. You're just a chicken. You jumped when he was shown on screen and now I know you're not going to sleep tonight. Which is ridiculous. Yamada puffed his chest out. Don't listen to him, little listener, I'm already over it. He was not in fact over Casper. The second there was a knock on the door, he screamed, broke 2 glasses filled with water, and knocked Aizawa off the couch. Oops, Yamada said as he jumped over the couch armchair and began to run away. Yamada Hisashi, you better not make me chase you or I swear, Aizawa promised as he sprang up faster than Izuku's ever seen him move outside of training. Deku snorted as he went to answer the door. Yo, Deku, Kaminari greeted as he and a few of his other friends all smiled at him from the door with hands full of food, drinks, and a few board games. What are you guys doing here? Deku asked as he ushered them in and grabbed a few items to set on the table. Remember what I said and don't stay up too late. If you're not gone by 11 on it, then you get to help clean up and you'll have extra training sessions with me after you finish your internships, Aizawa threatened, before disappearing into his room. Everyone shivered, but Mina quickly recovered. We wanted to spend some time with you before we leave for our internships. Guys, Deku sniffed as a single tear fell out of his eyes. Why are you crying? Uraraka asked while rushing over to him. She dropped her red soda and ran towards him. His eyes glistened as he hugged her and Mina. I'm just so happy, Deku replied as he gathered the others into an awkward hug. UA is famous for training and producing some of the best heroes in Japan, and yet our class can't even find a trash can, Shinso remarked as he kicked a can of soda into a dustpan. You still have time to leave before Aizawa catches you guys. I don't mind cleaning it up myself, Deku reminded his friends who chose to stay behind to help him clean up. I'm sure we can finish cleaning up before 11. We have 15 minutes. Uraraka assured them before tripping over a Pop-Tart wrapper and taking Tsu down with her. I'm so sorry. Uraraka cried as she helped Tsu up. It's fine, just be more careful, Tsu assured her. Only Uraraka, Tsu, and Shinso stayed to help Deku clean up. Mina left after reminding them whose idea it was to have this party. It took a while for them to finish picking everything up, but luckily the room didn't have any permanent damage. As soon as Aizawa opened his door, the 3 fled without so much as a goodbye. Since the room is cleaner than I expected, I'm going to pretend I didn't see Shinso, Uraraka, and Tsuyu run away a moment ago. Izuku was hanging out with his friends before they left for their internships. While he saw most of them yesterday, Ida hadn't been able to make it. So Deku decided to talk with Tenya one more time before he left. Sorry, we won't be able to visit you, Deku, Uraraka said as she slowly sipped a mango smoothie. Ah, it's okay, Uraraka. I hope you guys have fun and learn something. Izuku replied. Are you sure you're okay with doing your internship with your dad? Izuku asked Todoroki in a whisper. As much as I hate the idea, I need to train my fire quirk. Regrettably, he is the best choice for training it. I appreciate you checking up on me, Midoriya. I'll be fine, Todoroki insisted. Izuku sighed and chose to trust him. Well, training under our homeroom teacher will be fun, Shinso said. He was convinced that Izuku had a hand in this. Deku did mention Shinso to Aizawa, but he didn't convince him to mentor Shinso. You'll do great. I'll be right back. Izuku said as he rushed over to Ida. Ida, I need to talk to you. Please, Izuku nearly shouted. Ida jumped in surprise and everyone turned to stare at the pair. Well, let's talk Midoriya, Ida said, leading Midoriya somewhere a little more private. Look, I just want to apologize, Izuku started. The tension in Ida's shoulders disappeared in response. I am so sorry for pestering you and not being a considerate friend. I am very sorry and I just want you to know that you can come talk to me. Whenever you are ready, Izuku finished with a smile. Ida offered him a small smile. Thank you, Midoriya. I'm also sorry for brushing you off and being rude, Ida apologized. The two hugged, and Izuku felt Ida's appreciation. He also felt his rage bubbling underneath his appreciation. The two separated and rejoined their friends. They continued sipping smoothies and talking until they had to say their goodbyes. Don't worry about me. Just focus on training, Izuku reiterated to Uraraka. Alright, but I'm calling you at least 3 times during my internship, Uraraka promised. Thanks, Uraraka, Izuku smiled. Oh, please call me Ochako. No need to be so formal, Uraraka Ochako insisted. Okay. Izuku agreed. He waved his friends goodbye as they left. Izuku took a second to mentally prepare himself to say goodbye to Aizawa and Yamada. This was the first time in months they wouldn't be spending the night with him. He was a little upset, but also excited. He was hoping this would help them relax a little. They really hadn't since USJ. Remember, we will be coming in every morning and Yamada rambled until Aizawa finally stopped him. It's only a week, Yamada. Relax. We will be back and Problem Child is going to be in UA safe and sound. I know, I just worry about you, Yamada said as he hugged Izuku. I will be fine and you guys will be fine, Izuku insisted. After a lot of hugs from Yamada and one hug from Aizawa, they left. The first day was fine, it was actually great. The second night was just the same. The third night, however, was different. Izuku could feel it. It was actually building up, but Izuku was ignoring it. Rage, it was Ida's rage building up. Tonight it was going to explode. He knew it. Deku tried texting him before he fell asleep. Please don't do anything stupid, Izuku pleaded before eventually drifting off. He was back in the scary room. He started shaking as the door opened. His father was standing there, shaking his head in disappointment. Honestly, I don't understand why you refuse to listen, his dad began as he walked in. I'm sorry, Izuku apologized as he shrunk back into the corner of the room. The door started to close when he heard footsteps outside. Another victim? Izuku worried as he tried to peek around his father into the darkness of the hallway. Suddenly he heard Ida's voice. No, you can't hurt him, Izuku yelled at his dad as he rushed toward the door. Izuku, get back here this instant, his dad screamed. Deku shakily ran through the door and looked around wildly. At first, he saw the hallway connected that led to the room he just escaped from. Then it shifted into a dark alley. Ida was standing near an injured man and shouting something. Blood shone in the moonlight as Izuku turned to see who Ida was screaming at. It was the hero killer, who had killed many pros who had more experience than Ida. Izuku tried to grab Ida and pull him out of the alley, but his fingers slipped through Ida. Suddenly, the scene grew grainy and disappeared. Tenya! Izuku screamed as he jumped out of bed. I need to help him. I need to get to Hosu. I've never remembered my dreams before, so that means it wasn't a dream. Tenya needs help. Izuku's thoughts ran wild as he tried to focus. I need to help him, but I can't leave you. It's too risky. Think. Aizawa. Yamada. Izuku ran out of his room to call them. He struggled to dial Aizawa's number, but he managed. Only to find that Aizawa wasn't picking up. He tried Yamada's number, but he didn't answer either. What now? Izuku was shaking as he paced around the room. I need to help Ida, but Aizawa and Yamada aren't picking up, and Ida is in danger. I want to do something, but what can I do? Everyone else is away for their internships and the big three have been busy with an especially difficult case lately. I need to do something before it's too late. My cuffs. Izuku checked his cuffs and let out a sigh of relief. He was allowed to use his quirks. I know Aizawa and Yamada are going to be furious with me, but Tenya needs me right now. I'll have time to regret it later. Izuku faltered as he realized that he had no idea where Tenya was. Just focus on Tenya. Izuku thought to himself as he ran out of the dorm. Focus on Tenya. He was on the ground beaten, stabbed, and about to be killed. Focus on his surroundings. He's in a small alleyway. Imagine the buildings around him, the ground, and getting to him. Now, it happened all so fast. Maybe Izuku was running only on adrenaline, but that doesn't matter. He instinctively punched the villain away from Ida but was too busy checking Ida for injuries to process the person he punched. Or the sound of a knife hitting the ground. Midoriya? Are you alright? Midoriya asked softly as he struggled to catch his breath. As Ida continued to stare at him in surprise, Midoriya began to wonder if he had a concussion. Midoriya found a deep cut and his stomach turned unpleasantly. He took a deep breath and thought about healing Tenya's wound so that the bleeding would stop. Can you move? Let's get to a bigger street, so the pro heroes can help us. Midoriya reached out toward Ida, only to gasp as he noticed another person on the ground. Sir, let me help you. You're bleeding pretty badly. Izuku noted as he ran over to the pro hero. If I remember correctly, his name is Native. He sat down next to Native and focused on healing his wound just enough so that the stab wound wouldn't be fatal. Midoriya, what are you doing here? Get out of here. Tenya shouted suddenly. Maybe he's going into shock? That was a really late response. Midoriya thought nervously. I knew you needed someone, Ida, and I'm not leaving you both here to die. Do you need help standing up? Midoriya asked Native. I don't think I'll be able to comfortably carry both of them. And no, I can't, it's his quirk, Native explained to Midoriya. Is there someone else here? I don't remember seeing anyone else when I arrived. Midoriya, don't get involved. This has nothing to do with you. Tenya screamed desperately. What are you saying? Midoriya asked. He came to save you. How sweet. Why isn't he dressed in a costume like you are? A dark shadow asked curiously. Oh, how did I not notice him before? The villain walked out of the shadows slowly as he spared Deku a curious look. His eyes gleamed with confusion, curiosity, and deep hatred. Or maybe Midoriya saw all of those emotions in his eyes because his emotions were cutting into him. Midoriya shivered as he felt the depth of his anger and pain, as well as a feeling he never felt before. It was similar to Uraraka's enthusiasm and Bakugu's intensity, but it was darker, more twisted. Deku stepped back subconsciously while keeping his eyes trained on him. Midoriya, run. Tenya ordered. Tenya's feelings were even more suffocating than they were before. Most of the urgency and sadness he previously felt was gone. Yet Tenya was angrier than ever. And worried. Native's feelings were a nauseating combination of despair, hope, and guilt. I already told you. I won't leave either of you behind. Izuku shouted while moving to stand in front of Native. Native's cut was deeper than Tenya's, so he must be this man's original target. I have to protect them both until they can move again. Midoriya thought, even as he knew he had no chance in hell of surviving this. I wish we had backup. He must be skilled if he can take down a pro hero and Ida. He briefly thought of Todoroki. Todoroki's quick and precise attacks would really help with holding him off until the other two can move. Then we could fight him together and stand a chance. Also, Todoroki's feelings are really soothing even when he's upset. They gently swirl around Izuku while most people's feelings rush into him unpleasantly. Shudo froze two Nomus who were heading toward his father. Why are there so many Nomus? What kind of attack is the League planning? Shudo had many questions, but pushed them aside to stay focused on the task at hand. As he burned a Nomu, he felt a tug. It was like a rope was wrapped around him and it was leading him somewhere, but he didn't have anything visible wrapped around him. Weirdly enough, Shudo wanted to follow it. During the fight, he used a water manipulation quirk. It was really impressive. So that's his quirk. It's a good thing he was sent to the same area as you and Azui then. For us, his quirk is versatile. Oh, he has a really strong copy quirk. He said he copied a lot of quirks when he was younger and can still use them. That is rather impressive. Do you think he wants to be a hero after his situation is taken care of? Shudo was surprised when Shinso laughed in response. I asked the same question. He had the strangest look on his face. Like I asked if he wanted to be a dragon. It's him, I'm sure of it. Shudo, where are you going? His father shouted at him. I need to go somewhere. I will text you a location. Come when you finish up here. He shouted as he followed the imaginary pole. Shudo. He heard his father shout once more, but he ignored it. He needed to focus on the rope. It was really important that he followed the rope. He just knew at the end of the rope he was needed. Midoriya, run. It's not safe for you. Tenya insisted. I already told you I'm not leaving anyone behind. Izuku reaffirmed. Kid, get out of here. That's the hero killer, Stain. Native shouted. Who? Also, could that name be any more obvious? Midoriya criticized. The kid. He's the one from Shigaraki's picture. He didn't explain why he wanted him, only that he was after him. Stain thought as he threw a knife toward Midoriya's arm. Midoriya quickly dodged it and mentally thanked Aizawa for his training. While he has fast reflexes, he doesn't seem like much. Is he one of them? He must be if he's standing here protecting these fakes. Midoriya shivered as he felt Stain's feelings sharpen into a blade of pure hatred. Gone were the confusion and curiosity. I won't let you hurt them, Deku suddenly shouted. He was a little surprised by how confident he now felt. That was thanks to the pure adrenaline he was running on and how dire the situation was. Ah, what a heroic thing to say. Did you learn that at your internship this week? Stain asked as he threw two knives toward Native and Tenya. Deku increased his speed to grab them. Luckily, he caught them in time. I don't give a damn about being a hero. I only care about protecting them from you, Deku declared. He felt Tenya's mood shift and noticed a tear fall. Really? Stain questioned as he ran toward Deku. With a sword. Deku barely dodged his attack as he struggled to understand his quirk. He keeps trying to attack me with sharp knives and a sword, so he must need to cut me. But both Tenya and Native had stab wounds. How deep does the cut have to be to paralyze his victims? Does he need to draw blood? You really want to protect them both, huh? Stain noted, impressed. Okay, now Deku was upset. Of course I do. I'm not going to leave them here to die. Deku was horrified by the idea of leaving them behind. Are you training to be a hero? Stain asked. Deku paused and blinked in confusion. No, not really, Deku answered, not sure why he did. Stain took that opportunity to strike. Deku felt the cut and panic took over as Stain proceeded to lick the blood off the sword. Izuku was paralyzed, literally. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't twitch a finger. So that's why he needs to cut someone. If he licks their blood, he can paralyze them. Does blood type matter? I won't kill you. You are a true hero. A hero like All Might. I'll spare you. You have a lot of potential to become the greatest hero of your generation, Stain proclaimed. Leave him alone. Leave them both alone. Tenya shouted. Oh right, I forgot about you, Stain said as he walked over to Tenya. What kind of hero are you? You only fought me out of revenge, even forgot about our injured hero here. Stain pointed to Native. Your friend here is a better hero than you, Stain informed him. Tenya may have been frightened, but he knew that he needed to save Midoriya. Let my friend save Native and do what you want with me, Tenya offered. Ida what? No. Deku interrupted. How noble of you, Stain taunted as he raised his blade. I need to resist his quirk. Deku thought as he tried to convince his limbs to move. Deku suddenly felt really warm, but not as warm as Stain. Blazing flames hit Stain and their source was Todoroki. Todoroki! Tenya and Deku shouted. Ida? Midoriya! Todoroki's eyes widened as he caught sight of Deku's crumpled form. I only followed the pole because I was sure he was calling me, but I didn't expect him to be bleeding on the ground. Deku let out a breath as he felt Todoroki's emotions swirl around him. His nausea lessened, and he felt like he could breathe easier. Todoroki's feelings were a mix of concern and a fierce determination to protect. He must be really worried about Tenya and Native. They are in pretty bad shape. One after another. There are a lot of people getting in my way today, Stain coldly noted. Todoroki's ice quickly moved towards Stain, but he jumped up in time to avoid his attack. Native, Deku, and Ida were lifted by the ice. Don't worry. The pros will arrive in a few minutes. Todoroki sent flames towards Stain, but Stain dodged those as well. He's good, just like the information about him implies, but I'll protect them until the pros arrive. Todoroki's arm blazed as he fought Stain. I won't let you kill these guys, hero killer. Todoroki, don't let him lick your blood. You'll be paralyzed, and I think different blood types might affect how long you remain paralyzed, Deku explained. Blood type? That's correct, Stain confirmed. I was right about the blood type. I was just guessing, Deku exclaimed. Midoriya, focus. We need to get everyone out of here. You're not even supposed to leave UA. Todoroki reminded him as Stain tossed a dagger at him. Todoroki's cheek began to bleed and Deku watched with terror. I hate being paralyzed. I feel so useless. You have good friends in Genium, Stain informed him before sprinting towards Todoroki. He swung his sword toward him, but a large chunk of ice blocked it. Stain glanced up and Todoroki followed suit to see Stain's sword spinning through the air. Stain lurched forward and flicked his tongue out toward his cut. Luckily, Todoroki was able to stop him by bursting into flames. That was close. Stain moved to attack him once more, but Todoroki created a wall of ice. Stain jumped and slashed some of the ice with his sword. Why are you two? Please stop. I've inherited my brother's name. I have to do it? That guy's mine. Tenya insisted from the ground. Todoroki threw more flames at Stain. You inherited it? That's strange. Todoroki's flames disappeared, and he hit the ground to create a huge wall of ice. Stain easily dodged the multiple spikes of ice sent his way. The ingenium I saw before didn't have that look on his face, though, Todoroki added as he let out a puff of cold air. You've got a lot going on behind the scenes in your family too, huh? Todoroki. Deku wanted to comfort Todoroki so much he unthinkingly reached out toward him, and his finger twitched. Stain quickly slashed at the ice wall until its pieces fell to the ground. To block your view against an opponent faster than you. What a foolish plan, Stain pointed out. Todoroki created more flames with his left side to defend against Stain. I wonder about that. Suddenly, two blades pierced his arm and his flames flickered out. You're pretty good too. Stain jumped and was about to land a killing blow on Native when a blur collided with Stain. Midoriya! Todoroki shouted in surprise as Deku threw Stain into the wall and attempted to restrain him. Stain managed to kick Deku hard enough to send him flying a few feet. He shouldn't have to fight villains, he's a civilian. I should be able to hold Stain off until the pros arrive. Get back, Midoriya, Todoroki warned. He quickly sent sharp spikes of ice Stain's way. He breathed a sigh of relief when Deku moved to his side. You don't have to fight. I can defend all of us until the pros arrive, Todoroki assured Deku as he created more ice to keep Stain at bay. Deku frowned and moved closer to Todoroki. I know I'm not training to be a pro like all of you, but you're hurt. I've been training with Aizawa for months. I'm not as skilled as all of you, but I want to keep you all safe, Deku explained softly. Todoroki wanted to argue, but the look in Deku's eyes stopped him. All right, Todoroki reluctantly agreed. I think our best option is to hold on by avoiding close combat until the pros get here. Izuku nodded. Todoroki, you've already shed too much blood. I'll distract him so you can support me from behind. Todoroki frowned, but nodded. If you overwork your quirk, let me know and I'll make sure to keep Stain away from you. Thank you, Deku replied before disappearing. Deku gently set his shoes down before making his way towards Stain. He hit him once, but Stain caught his hand the second time. Multiple quirks, that's uncommon, Stain remarked as Todoroki sent flames toward them. They both jumped back and Deku switched to using his speed quirk and teleportation. Once Deku landed a second hit on Stain, Todoroki allowed himself a moment to think. I'm still nervous about Midoriya, but as long as I keep Stain distracted, we'll make it out of here alive. Todoroki turned and glanced at his classmate, still paralyzed on the ground. Ida, I've been worried about you since your older brother was attacked because I know well the face of someone who would act on pent-up resentment. I also know just how narrow the field of vision can get for someone like that. That day, I told her everything about what had happened and about who I am now. Mother cried and apologized, forgiving me with a smile surprisingly quickly. She said that for me to move forward without anything holding me back would make her happy and be her salvation. The old me would definitely not have been able to choose my old man's agency for the internship. It's not that I've forgiven him, and I have no intention of doing so. It's just so I could experience the fact that he is the number 2 hero with my own eyes and body and accept that. Todoroki threw a particularly large amount of flames towards Stain. Thank you, Todoroki. He almost got me that time, Deku cheerily said. Be careful, Todoroki repeated. Ida watched Deku land hits on Stain while Todoroki aimed precise attacks at Stain. Please. Stop. Tenya begged as he teared up once more. Already. Tenya trailed off as the past few minutes flashed before his eyes. Save that guy first. I won't leave either of you behind. I think our best option is to hold on by avoiding close combat until the pros get here. If you want us to stop, then stand up. Todoroki yelled in response. A tear darkened the ground. Ida was forced out of his brooding when Stain pierced Deku's leg deeply. Todoroki managed to hit the knife with his fire quirk, which promptly had Stain dropping it and jumping back. Todoroki froze it so that Stain wouldn't be able to lick Deku's blood. Deku teleported near Todoroki and started to heal his leg. I feel so tired, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Maybe I should try teleporting Ida and Native away. But will Todoroki be okay? I also don't know where I'd take them. Deku smiled tiredly at Tenya and Tenya cried harder. Tenya, we're helping you because we're friends and you're hurting. Tenya knew he didn't just mean physically. Ida, think hard about what you want to be. What kind of hero am I? They're only hurt because they wanted to protect me. In order to teach him a lesson, I used my brother's name. I only saw what was in front of me. I couldn't see anything except myself. It's just as you say, hero killer. I'm different from them. I'm immature. I can't hold a candle to them. Even so, ice and flame. I'd like to see you dodge this. No one's ever told you. You're too focused on your quirk. You're being careless. Deku gasped and watched in horror as Stain ran towards them with his sword. I shouldn't have stopped to heal my wound. I should have just wrapped a cloth around it. I need to move and save him. If I don't stand up right now, I'll never, ever be able to catch up to them or Tensei. Suddenly Ida was on his feet, activating his quirk. He quickly pushed Stain away. Ida, you're free? That quirk isn't as great as I thought. We need to work together, all 3 of us. Izuku announced after his cut finally closed. I'll keep him distracted while you 2 come up with a plan, Deku suggested. I don't know if it's a second dose of adrenaline or blood loss, but I'm sure we'll be able to defeat him together. Deku thought as he activated his speed quirk. Izuku then activated his strength quirk and loudly punched him across his face. His jaw made an odd popping noise. Todoroki, Midoriya, this has nothing to do with you 2, and I apologize, Ida began. You're saying that again? Todoroki questioned incredulously. That's why I can't allow you 2 to bleed more than this. Ida continued. It's no use trying to be reformed, for appearance's sake. A person's essence does not change so easily. You will never be anything but a fake who prioritizes his own selfish desires. You are a cancer to society that warps the idea of heroes. Someone must set you straight. Stain cut in as he brought the fight closer to them. You're an anachronistic fundamentalist. Ida, don't listen to the logic of a murder, Todoroki assured him. No, he's right. I have no right to call myself a hero. Even so, I cannot give in. If I give in, then Ingenium will die, Ida explained. Stain jumped past Deku and ran towards them. Todoroki shot flames that sent Stain back. Then Deku took advantage of the distraction. Deku's punch sent Stain to the other side of the alley. Idiot. The hero killer is after me and that kid in white armor, right? Don't fight back. It'd be better if you ran away. Native yelled from the ground. It doesn't look like he'll give me an opening to do that. Something clearly changed just now. He's flustered, Todoroki pointed out while sending ice his way. Deku and Stain both dodged in time. Ida, you're our deputy representative. Right now we need someone to lead us. Todoroki shouted. You're right. We need to overwhelm him together. Tenya confidently explained to Todoroki. Todoroki nodded in agreement. Todoroki, can you regulate temperature? I'm not used to doing it with my left yet. Why? Freeze my legs. Without plugging up the exhausts. You're in the way, Stain growled. He tossed 2 swords at Deku and pinned him to the ground. He didn't bother to use his quirk on him. He just ran towards the other 2. Sorry, Deku said as he struggled to get free. Stain tossed a long knife at Todoroki once he reached them. Ida pushed him out of the way and took the knife instead. He fell to the ground and let out a huff of pain. A thicker knife suddenly found a home in his arm. Ida, Todoroki began. Just do it. Hurry. Why didn't I think of this earlier? Izuku mentally scolded himself as he teleported to a different spot. The swords came with him, and he quickly pulled them out. One was deeply lodged in his shoulder while the other just went through his clothes. He tossed the knives aside and struggled to catch his breath. Todoroki froze Ida's legs while Deku activated his strength and speed quirks. Ida yanked the knife out of his arm with his teeth while Todoroki threw flames and ice at Stain. Ida pulled the other knife out and activated his quirk. Blue flames and a blur pounced on Stain. Todoroki cheered them on as they both cornered Stain. Unsurprisingly, the simultaneous kick and punch had Stain going as still as native. Knowing how many hits Stain withstood earlier, Todoroki and Ida carefully watched Stain. Stain's eyes flew open as he swung his last sword toward Ida. Ida ducked in time. Here's my chance. I will defeat you. This time, you, as a criminal dash. Keep after him. Todoroki shouted as he threw flames their way. Ida immediately kicked him. And I, as a hero. Blood fell from Stain's face as Todoroki's flames reached him. He gasped after being hit with his flames. Todoroki caught Ida, Deku, and Stain with his ice. Stand up. He's still. The 3 of them stared as Stain remained still. He's probably knocked out after all that, right? Deku asked hesitantly. Then let's restrain him and get out to the street. Is there anything to tie him up with? Todoroki asked as he began looking around. Just in case, let's take all his weapons off him, Deku suggested. Good idea, Todoroki replied. Once they finished removing Stain's weapons and tying him up, the adrenaline left Deku and his eyes rolled back. Midoriya! Todoroki anxiously shouted as he used his ice to catch him. Deku blinked. 3 concerned faces were staring down at him. How do you feel? Todoroki asked. I feel okay. I think I overused my quirk, but I'll live, Deku assured them. I'm glad, Todoroki said sincerely before his face shifted into a scarier look. Deku swallowed nervously. Native helped him up wordlessly. Thank you very much. That's my line, Native joked. Oh, I'll pull it. Deku offered nervously when he noticed Stain. You just fainted, you will not pull anything, Todoroki scolded him. He still had a dark look on his face. Deku stepped forward to see what he could help with when he winced in pain. Ouch, now that the adrenaline is all gone. Everything hurts. Suddenly Native scooped him up. What about your injury? Deku asked. You healed it enough that it doesn't hurt to carry you. Deku started to protest. You're hurt, right? Let me do this at least. Thank you very much, Deku replied with embarrassment. After convincing Ida that he wouldn't be pulling their hastily put-together contraption either, Todoroki turned to Deku. I can't believe you ran straight into danger without telling anyone. I tried to call Aizawa and Yamada, but they didn't pick up, Deku explained quickly. So instead of finding any of the teachers who remained during the internships, or Netsu, or calling the police, you decided to go after a villain who has killed many pros? I didn't know that, Izuku tried to explain before Todoroki cut him off. You went after a villain you knew nothing about? You could have been killed, Todoroki exclaimed in exasperation. Todoroki continued lecturing Izuku for a few minutes. He only stopped when Izuku winced in pain and admitted that his ribs hurt badly and that all the shifting from being on Native's back was making it hurt worse. He was gently set down and Todoroki helped Deku walk. Todoroki's stab wounds ached with so much of Deku's weight on him, but he refused to admit it aloud. Especially when Deku admitted his rib wasn't the only injury he had. He was also stabbed and his ankle was sprained. "You were so reckless," Todoroki scolded as Native pulled his phone out to call an ambulance and the police. "You already yelled at me. Do you really need to continue?" Izuku complained. "Well, you shouldn't be here in the first place. Aizawa is going to be furious with you," Todoroki reminded him. Izuku groaned in response. Ida walked closer to them and bowed deeply. You were injured because of me. I am truly sorry," Ida apologized to them as his tears hit the ground. "I couldn't do anything through my anger. I'm sorry too. Even though I could tell that you were upset, I couldn't help you." "Even though we're friends," Deku replied with tears in his own eyes. "Pull yourself together. You're the deputy rep, right?" Todoroki interjected. "Yeah," Ida agreed, while wiping the tears on his arm. A large animal went soaring past, then startling them all. "Get down," a voice ordered, but it was too late. The creature grabbed Midoriya and started to fly higher into the air. "Midoriya!" Todoroki gasped as blood fell onto his face. "A villain?" Ida asked in shock. "It must be." Native agreed. Izuku barely had enough time to process what happened when he felt a burning feeling in his back. He blinked through the pain and realized that a winged Nomu had grabbed him. He felt fear overtake him and he started to shake. This was familiar to him. It was just like when his father kidnapped him the first time. "Oh no, I'm being kidnapped again." Suddenly he was crying with his mother. As they clung to each other in fear. His mother hugged him so tight he could barely breathe, but he just held her back as tightly as he could. Their shirts were wet and his nose was full of snot. Then he and the Nomu were falling toward the ground. And the sound of a knife hitting flesh brought him back to reality. Once they hit the ground, he crawled away from the Nomu. He stared bewildered at the hero killer. "He just saved my life." Stain suddenly produced a knife and launched himself at Todoroki. He licked the blood off his cheek and the Nomu screeched. It started plummeting toward the ground. This society overgrown with fake heroes. Stain ran toward them and jumped into the air. And the criminals who wave their power around idly. He plunged the knife into the Nomu. "Should all be purged." Drool leaked from Stain's mouth as he leaned forward. Stain yanked the knife out of the Nomu as he caught his breath. "To create a more just society." Stain glared and hissed, "Endeavor? Hero killer." Endeavor spat as his first blazed with fire. Stain began glaring even harder. "I must make things right. Someone must be dyed in blood. I must take back what it means to be a hero. Come, try and get me, you fakes. The only one I'll let kill me is the true hero." Stain's pupils began to shake crazily. "All might." Stain's knife clattered to the ground as his drool shone and he was frozen in place. "He's unconscious," Endeavor announced. Todoroki ran over and helped Midoriya up. He checked him for injuries before leading him closer to Ida. The three leaned against each other for comfort. Everyone stayed quiet long after the police and ambulance arrived.